For all the future speakers, I have been very flexible in allowing folks to exceed their 2 minutes. When you start taking advantage, I have to start enforcing the 2-minute rule. Out of courtesy to everyone else who wants to speak, I would ask that you please observe the 2 minutes. Thank you so much. This meeting is now reconvened. Okay, the next item, not the next item, but the next speaker on the topic is Ms. Pamela D. Giovanni. This is on item number 2. Did she step out? All right, we'll hold her card. The next person to speak is a Mr. Richard, is it Swall? Swan? Oh, Ms. Giovanni. Okay, you have the floor. 2 minutes, please. Thank you.
Good evening. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak. I would just like to address the part about people talk about the money, and I do understand the money, but I would like to also public safety, public safety, public safety. And also they are the lowest, as of now, the lowest paid in the county, and they have been moving to the sheriff's offices by numbers extraordinary. I actually want to let you know that when we do have these disasters, our police officers need to respond. If we only have 6 police officers for every 1,000 residents, it's going to be difficult. We are having more people come in, more things are being built. It's a natural progress. We are making progress. There will be things in the future. We are Daly City. I remember Councilmember Ray Buenaventura saying that. We are Daly City. We will do better. We will bring in a hotel. We have great heads like Tatum Mother's Head and department heads that are working on economics. So it's not over. We have requests for the land, some of our land acquisitions, and we have great things in our future that we can look forward to and make a plan and develop together and make it a better Daly City to bring in the economics with hotels and support. But we can no longer let our officers be on the street and try to respond like that, because they were there in seconds with a SWAT team for me, or I wouldn't be standing here. And that was like even a few years ago. But as of now, I know how many calls they get, and it's out of control. So I agree. After we see these officers in other cities being shot in their cars, and it just builds more tension and it brings some more stress on our officers, it's got to stop. They have families too. They need to go home to their families too, and they have to support their families. So I support our police officers and our public safety that I hope that every resident deserves in this city. You deserve it when you live here in Daly City. You deserve to have public safety when you make that call. You deserve them to come save your loved ones, and they are there for you, never complaining on the street. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Di Giovanni. All right, one last card on this. We have a Mr. Richard Swall. Did he come back in? Oh, sir.
Yeah.
Did I pronounce that correct? Is it Swall or Swan?
Swan.
Swan. Okay,
Yeah.
my apologies, sir.
Bird.
We have an outstanding police department. I've had several interactions with the department, also with the chief, and they're excellent. Couldn't ask for better. Some concerns that I have, and I'm not managing the police department, so I don't know the ins and outs of a lot of these things. As we're increasing salaries and overtime, does the overtime also impact the pension payments that are going to go down, which means that there's an even larger commitment that we have to future expenditures? You know, it's a matter of public record what every individual in Daly City gets paid. And something that I notice is an extraordinary amount of overtime that the police are working. And what I'm wondering is, as a manager who has to balance things, do you need to give these guys more overtime in order to retain them? But on the other hand, do you really want to have police officers running around 60, 70 hours a week at premium cost? Would it be a better route to try to bring on some more police officers? Or does their salary attract the guys? But I think a thing that we need to look at is, you know, there's an extraordinary amount of overtime expense, and if that goes on to a pension commitment, then this erosion that we're talking about on the rainy day fund needs to be looked at in that way too. And I haven't got anything against the police. Every time I've dealt with the police in this town, they have been absolutely A+. But I do want to know, are we working them half to death? Is that part of the reason we're losing them, or is it because they're not bringing in enough money? And I think that's something that has to be looked at. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Swan. All right, I have no other further cards on this particular item. Ms. Benaventura, did you have something?
I make the motion to adopt the resolution supporting item number 2.
Second.
Okay, we have a first and a second on item number 2. Any discussion? All right, hearing none. Madam City Attorney, I think we should do a roll call. Okay, I think it's best that we do a roll call on this. Okay, roll call, please, on item number 2.
Ms. Christensen?
In the taking my ability to be as completely transparent and to have you hold me as accountable as possible, I'd like to explain a few sentences about my vote before I make it. This particular proposal is a 6% cost of living raise, which historically, once one group gets a cost of living, historically, every employee group in the city has gotten a cost of living increase. Now, those contracts have not been negotiated yet, but historically, for the last 20 years, that's always happened. So I proposed at the beginning that the cost of living be less, and that we do have a problem with our police officers not being paid as much as other agencies. And so to have an equity adjustment, which is not across the board, it's for that specific group with whom we have difficulty retaining officers and where we have difficulty recruiting officers. My colleagues did not agree with me, and so I'm in the situation of being forced to vote no, because I think that they needed to get that money, but in a different configuration that would not obligate us to pay the entire staff that additional amount of money. So to police officers, we honor your work. You deserve a raise, and I'm really sorry that the way it's configured, I cannot support it at this time. If it were configured the other way, you'd have my full support. So the answer is no.
Mr. Gingona?
Aye.
Mr. Buenaventura?
Aye.
Ms. Manalo?
Aye.
Mr. Sylvester?
Aye. Okay, thank you very much.
Mr. Mayor, before we go on to number 10,
Should we
I've
do-
just been informed by the city clerk, I don't think we voted on number 1.
Right, I was just thinking about that, so,
I'll move that.
okay, Mr. Gingona would like to move the accepting of, on item number 1, the $13,900 grant from the Daly City Public Library Associates. We have a first, is there a second?
Second.
A second by Vice Mayor Manalo. Any further discussion? Shall we do a roll call? I think we should do them all on the, okay, roll call, please.
Yes.
Mr. Gingona?
Aye.
Mr. Buenaventura?
Aye.
Ms. Manalo?
Aye.
Mr. Sylvester?
Aye. Thank you very much, Madam City Attorney. All right, moving, I think the next item we pulled was number 10. Was it 1, 2, and 10? Right?
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll, item number 10, the approving of the annual agreement between the City of Daly City and the Daly City Comer Chamber of Commerce for the fiscal year 2017, 2018. Okay, do we have a, Ms. Montel? Okay. Council has read the information regarding item number 10, and it was requested, I asked that it be pulled, and I believe it was Councilmember
I accommodated your request.
Oh, you
She
can-
wanted it pulled too.
Okay.
So,
So what I'd like to do is open it up for comment from the council at this particular time. And I'll start with you, or you want me to go first?
Go ahead.
Mr. Mayor, for the
Yes.
benefit of the public here and those
Yes.
watching, would you like me to just briefly say what this item is?
Yeah,
That's a good idea.
people out there can understand, yeah,
Okay.
what's going on.
So tonight, what you have before you is a recommendation that the council review and approve the annual contract with the Chamber of Commerce of Daly City and Colma for fiscal year July 17-18, which started on July 1st of this month. This is an annual contract in which the city provides a grant of funds to the Chamber of Commerce in the amount of $49,229. The purpose being to produce a number of events throughout the year and otherwise market the business community of Daly City to the larger Daly City community in an effort to build a strong business backbone in the community. As was expressed earlier in the previous item by a number of people, one of the ways that we can build fiscal sustainability in Daly City is ensuring that we have a economically balanced environment in our community, which means that part of building sustainability is having a strong business community that contributes to sales tax generation, as well as providing amenities from a variety of retailers throughout the community that benefit our residents. And that is the activity that the Chamber of Commerce is involved in annually, is to promote the business community and all the various members of the Chamber and what they provide to the community. Several of the goals that are outlined in the agreement that you've been provided by the Chamber of Commerce for consideration include maintaining a roster of all the businesses that the Chamber is able to maintain as members, or new members that hopefully they're generating each and every year to expand the membership of the Chamber and to help expand the activities that the Chamber is engaged in. They also assist the city with marketing programs, promoting economic benefits of conducting business in Daly City. So they provide information when businesses are considering moving to Daly City. One of the first phone calls they always make right after the city usually is to the Chamber to find out how many businesses there are in the community, what kind of work the Chamber of Commerce does. And the Chamber of Commerce certainly does provide information about business opportunities in the city. They have a website that potential businesses or even current businesses can review and find out what's going on in the Chamber. The Chamber is involved in fundraising, continuing to help generate revenue to support new programs that they offer and to develop self-sufficiency. For several years now, the City of Daly City, as well as our counterparts in the City of Colma, have contributed towards the work of the Chamber. However, it's not enough to sustain the work of the Chamber, and so they are constantly doing fundraising. Each year they recognize outstanding members of the business community. They have an annual awards program. Probably one of the most important things that the Chamber does in the community is they have an annual scholarship program in which they provide scholarships to graduating seniors from the high schools here in Daly City who are on their way to college. And so the funds that the city provides to the Chamber to undertake these various activities is really seed money. It's not enough to conduct all of the various activities that they're engaged in, but it is seed money to ensure that the business community knows that there is a commitment from the city to support the Chamber's activities and to work collaboratively with the business community. And that's what this agreement represents. I would urge the council to raise whatever questions, specific questions that you have regarding the agreement and the annual report of activities to the Chamber CEO, Georgette Sarles, who is here, because I'm not responsible for the execution of this agreement. It's really the Chamber that does the work. So I can't respond to whatever questions you have regarding their activities, but the Chamber CEO is here and available to respond to questions. And with that, I'll conclude my report.
Thank you, Ms. Martell. I have to apologize. I had to open up my laptop because I wrote a letter, and I had some questions. Did, Ms. Martell, did you have an opportunity to forward my questions to Ms. Salas, CEO of the Chamber?
No, I did not. I'm sorry, I didn't we've tried to contact her. We just got in touch with her this afternoon, about, attending the meeting tonight.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. All right, I have about 15 questions that I ask of the Chamber, and hopefully they can be answered. Shall we have Ms. Salas come up to the microphone or to the chair?
If she's unable to, we could give her the
Oh, yeah,
the
there's a mic right
microphone,
there.
'cause
Okay, great.
standing that long will be,
Sure.
may be a problem.
Mr. Mayor,
Thank you.
I have had 3 conversations with the city manager's office this week, and I have been very attainable. I
So,
have
ask the questions.
probably about 40 phone calls that I average every day. So I've been very accessible, but I have not seen anything come from you, or I would have diligently taken care of it and got it back to you properly.
I appreciate that. However, before I vote, I need to obtain some answers.
Fine.
And so that's why I had drafted these questions approximately 4 days ago, and I was hoping that you may have received them. Part of the contract states to maintain records of all businesses that contact the Chamber regarding new locations and follow up with these businesses within 3 months after initial contact to see if further assistance is desired. Is this information shared with city staff? Because it says it's with city staff as soon as possible after it's received.
We haven't gotten anything from the city. In other words, let me reiterate that. What's happened that I can attest to in the past 55 years that I've been involved with this, we usually would receive a list, ongoing list from the city of new businesses coming in. It's the Chamber's responsibility to contact them and see whichever way they can assist them in any way. Groundbreakings, grand openings, advertising, anything, okay? And then we would naturally give this information back to the city. However, I have been saying for the past 2 years, we have been not seeing anything from the city as far as any incoming businesses or anything that we're supposed to work with or work on. So, but anything that we do, yes, we do let them know, yes.
Mr. Mayor, I think you're referring to item number 5 in the agreement, and that specifically says that it is the chamber that is to share the information that they receive, to maintain records of all businesses that contact the chamber, and to provide that information and follow up with the businesses within 3 months after initial contact, to see if there's any further assistance desired by the business. It's not about the city getting it, it's about the chamber doing follow-up to contacts that are made directly to them.
Thank you, Ms. Martell. Would you kindly read the last sentence of that clause?
Yes, and to share this information with the city staff as soon as possible.
Okay, so my question is,
We do this on an ongoing basis.
and is council advised of this information that's shared with staff as to new businesses that have inquired?
And who's the staff person she's sharing with?
Who's the staff person that's being shared with?
I think they are, because Angie generally gets information out to all of the council members.
Item number 2, to maintain and make available to the city each year an automated database of current chamber members, which includes but is not limited to location, type of business, and other relevant information such as number of employees, contact person, officers, and etc.
You have our ongoing information. Right now, we just got through with some work on that, and I'm happy to report that we have 697 members.
to participate in mayor and chamber walks throughout the business community, the location, date, and time and duration of the walk to be mutually agreed upon with the purpose to meet and talk to business people in their places of work about current conditions, issues, and concerns.
Mr. Mayor, here in Daly City, it's been somewhat different than in Colma. As you know, we represent both cities. Colma has a smaller business area, and we've done several mayorals over there. And like, for example, we've done maybe one at Metro. One year we went to all the cemeteries. Here, the last one I did was with Carol Klatt. And I've always been on hand to do them, but it's a large area, and it's a large run to walk, and it takes a long time. And for some reason, we're always ready and able and available and willing, but we don't seem to get anywhere. We don't seem to get anybody, they're very busy in other pursuits, and for some reason, this has not come across over the past at least 7 years.
So maybe this is an opportunity for the mayor to initiate one.
Correct.
Okay.
The Chamber will submit a progress report to the council on a semi-annual basis and shall prepare and submit to the city manager or her designated representative a proposed budget of expenditures for the period of the time covered by the agreement.
We did that.
So I haven't seen that, only I've just seen a progress report based upon the request to renew the contract, but I haven't seen on a semi-annual basis.
Well, I'm a little confused there, Mr. Mayor. We thought we were submitting the progress report as we've always done over all these years. I didn't know there was a difference in that. I figured that was exactly what you wanted, and we diligently filled it out, you know, as expeditiously as we could. But I don't know. I'm not aware if there's something in and above that you want. If that is the case, you certainly will have it.
Okay, well, on the progress report, I think it's good to know, especially as you have here in the contract that you want us to sign, and it says on a semi-annual basis. So this kind of, it's there for a reason to let us know that the chamber is, you know, working and doing what it is that they say that we agree to. But I'm just making mention, I haven't seen it until now.
Well, actually, this one here that you have in front of you, the progress, the last time this was signed, this contract was signed, was October 19th of last year. And this was submitted in July, so it's, what is that? A little over 6 months, but I didn't know that you wanted one sooner, or if you want one like on a 3-month basis or whatever, which can be done. It's very easy. But we thought we were complying by submitting this as it is.
I only have a couple of more. I'm just not going to belabor this and continue in this questioning. I'm just going to make a couple of comments, and I'm going to end. I feel, well, first of all, I reviewed your 501c3, and it comes back listed as the Greater Daly City Chamber of Commerce.
Yes.
And that's what you operate under. I have no problems with the collaboration with other cities such as Colma. I consider them a great neighbor, but I think you know, need to be reminded that under that 501c3, it's to Daly City. It's because Daly City's name.
Mr. Mayor, the chamber is actually not a 501c3. They are a 501c6, which is a tax-exempt trade organization. It's different than being a 501c3 nonprofit. It's still tax-exempt, but it falls under a different section of the tax code.
Okay, I didn't really check, but the determination letter still states Greater Daly City Chamber of Commerce. That's what it states.
That is correct, because
Okay.
when they were incorporated, that was the name under which they were incorporated.
Thank you. The other issue that I have is anytime money is requested from someone, I think it would be very courteous to make sure that you have the spelling of the correct, of the person who you're trying to get the funds from. You know, some homework needs to be done to make sure all the Ts are dashed and the Is are dotted. Another concern I have is your financials. I looked over the financials, and I'm just wondering if all the information is there in the financials that has been provided to us.
Yes.
I didn't get any.
Okay. So I'm concerned about any other financial instruments that was not reported, such as maybe CDs and bonds and et cetera. So everything is all there, or is everything there that should be reported to us?
Everything is there as it should be reported.
Thank you so much. All right, that's all I have at this particular time.
I have some questions.
Yes, Councilmember Christensen,
Number 19,
number 19.
which is the same one that you brought up, is about the report coming in on the same annual basis. But for me, this was something we negotiated last time, to put very precise language that at the end of the year, that would be the fiscal year when this thing ends, which is now, the chamber shall submit an independent third-party financial audit report to the city.
Good point.
And we have not seen that. I'm assuming that part of that, even if it was a very superficial, kind of overview of a financial report, would include the IRS 990 tax-exempt filing as well. I was unable to find that. It's usually online. Could not find that. So this is a group, an organization of highly professional business people. So gathering this information and getting this third-party financial audit report to the city should not be something that they could not do. It's a group of highly professional people. So for me, that requirement needs to be met before we can go forward with contributing to the organization on the ongoing basis, which I would definitely like to be able to do. But because this obligation has not been met from last year, I think we could even pass this with a contingency that payment would begin after we get an independent third-party financial statement that includes the IRS tax thing, or it could just come back to us when we receive that, and we could go ahead then, whatever my colleagues would prefer to do. But
How long would something like that take?
the IRS part? If you've got your documents together, I would imagine it wouldn't take more than 2 or 3 weeks. And like I said, it's a group of, highly professional business people. I'm sure that their financial documentation is in order. They just need to get a third party, someone outside the organization to review that and give us a report. It doesn't have to be because we had talked about this before, it doesn't have to be an official audit, like ready, but it needs to be a professional financial report that gives us a lot more detail.
I think that's a good idea, and I would support your motion to continue it if you want to.
Well, I didn't make a motion, but,
If you
but whether we want to pass this with the contingency or to wait until we get those documents, which should be forthcoming in the next, month or so, then we could go ahead and pass this with extreme confidence that the finances or everything's.
Yeah, I think we should wait. I think we should see it. If there's something to those documents, the need for it obviously is the information. So
Yeah.
when we see the information.
Well, and it allows the whole community to be confident that our
Yeah.
$49,000 is being spent wisely, and I am completely confident that it is being, but we need to have that official documentation.
So I-
And if I may also request, I was looking over the documents here, and
Yeah.
I see, Ms. Salas, you signed this on July 13th, and today is the 24th. I would hope that next year, we can have some preparation that this is brought before the council prior to the beginning of the fiscal year, which is July 1st, instead of us trying to rush and get this over and done with. So that's just my thoughts as well. So, any other further comment on this? All right, so I'll entertain the motion.
I'll make
if
the
there-
motion to calendar this to maybe the August meeting? Okay.
To get the, well, let's make the, let's
Okay,
finish
that
off.
we would,
We gotta
hold it, calendar this item to the August meeting to provide the chamber with the opportunity to present us with an independent third-party financial audit report, including the IRS 990 forms.
I'd like to have one thing to that, Ned. Last year, there were a number of new conditions that you and.
Right, and that
you
was
had-
one of them.
Is that all of the ones that you'd like to take a look at? To the exception of that, have they all been complied with? And if they have, then that's the only one we're looking at, right?
If I may say something here,
I think that's the significant.
Is that the one?
That's the significant one that we negotiated that has not been met. The rest of them have been met to one degree or another, but in a satisfactory fashion.
if you note on there, this last time, it was dated October 19th. I think what the accountant was confused. I think he thought he wanted this paperwork by December 31st instead of July 1st. I think he got confused there. It's not a problem. He can take care of it and have it for you. I can assure you that. Just like we've provided it for the 60 years that we've been doing so.
But I think we're requesting a more detailed
We have,
financial, and I'm sure you've got all the information. That shouldn't be a problem.
well, he's a bona fide CPA, and he's
Oh,
very well
fabulous.
recognized. I'm sure he can.
Fabulous. So that'll be easy.
Councilmember Christensen, I'd like to also add that I would like to get an update as to upcoming events, access or review of the database that's supposed to be provided, and also the mayoral walks as to when that can be scheduled as well.
You're the mayor. You just need to give her a call.
All right. So, Councilmember Buenaventura made the motion. Councilmember Christensen kind of like refined the motion.
Yes.
So I would take that as a first and second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, I think we should take this is a consent item. Voice vote, yes. On the motion, voice vote, please.
All those in favor? All those in favor?
Oh, okay, a voice vote, roll call. Okay, all those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Okay,
And
thank
I'm
you.
looking forward to being able to support the chamber.
Thank you so much. All right, that does it for the consent agenda. And, okay, number 12, now we move into public hearings. Item number 13, public hearing on the assessment of fair housing, and I'll turn it over to staff. Ms. Sullivan and Ms. Mothershead. Mike, you coming up in here on this too, or you're gonna handle the PowerPoint? Okay. This is item number 13, folks.
Nothing.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, this
It's 14, 15.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor and members of the council. The city receives community development block grant and home funds from the Department of Housing and Urban Development, HUD. We use these funds for affordable housing and community development programs that serve lower income residents. As a recipient of these funds, the city is required to submit an assessment of fair housing. We are preparing this assessment in collaboration with the County of San Mateo, the cities of Redwood City, South City, and San Mateo, and the housing authorities of the County of San Mateo and South San Francisco. So what is the assessment of fair housing? In short, AFH. Okay, so the assessment of fair housing was preceded by the analysis of impediments to fair housing choice, also known as the AI. But the AFH is a more comprehensive planning document, and in addition to looking at barriers to fair housing, it also examines barriers to economic opportunity. The AFH is rooted in the obligation of HUD recipients to affirmatively further fair housing, which is part of the Fair Housing Act. The Fair Housing Act prohibits discrimination in the sale, rental, and financing of housing based on race, color, religion, sex, national origin, disability, or familial status. So we are required to engage skip that part. So there are three main parts to the AFH. The first part is to analyze fair housing issues. The second is to identify contributing factors. And then the third is to set goals and strategies to address contributing factors. So in preparing the AFH, HUD requires us to engage the community, a community participation process. And so this process has included a focus group with stakeholders, 4 resident focus groups, a community survey on housing needs and barriers to housing choice, and we had a response of close to 4,000 to that survey, 2 community open house meetings, and the county also led 2 focus groups for landlords and developers and real estate professionals. In addition to all this, we are having this public hearing tonight. The purpose of the public hearing is to obtain the views of the community on data related to the assessment of fair housing and affirmatively furthering fair housing in Daly City's housing and community development programs. The notice of public hearing was published in the local paper. The notice was also sent to libraries and the Community Service Center, along with Exhibit A of the staff report that you have before you. And the notice was also posted on the city's website. Also posted on the city's website were links to the HUD AFH-related data. So next I'm going to show you some of the data that HUD provided. So this one is a dot density map of, of the race and ethnicity in Daly City. This next map shows the low poverty index by census tract. So the higher the score, which means the darker the shaded area, the less exposure to poverty. And this third map shows the location of rental housing that is affordable to households of at the 50% AMI. So the higher the percentage of the affordable housing, the more affordable housing there is in that census tract. Okay, so we've taken this data. Oh, I forgot to mention, we worked with a consultant, BBC Research Consulting, and so they've taken this data and the results of the survey and the results of the focus groups and community meetings that I mentioned earlier to prepare the AFH. I also forgot to mention that HUD requires this public hearing to be held prior to the publication of a draft AFH. So I just wanted to mention some of the primary fair housing issues that the consultants found in Daly City. The first is that there is very limited affordable housing. The second is displacement. Currently, our city has the highest home ownership rate for African Americans, but with the loss of homeowners and declining home ownership rate and the loss of African Americans, this may change. There is also a large number of evictions. Currently, the city provides the best access to low poverty environments for low-income residents, but with the potential for gentrification, this is at risk. We have low access to employment relative to the other cities in the county, and another finding was the limited support for fair housing enforcement and outreach. So what's next? So we're holding this public hearing tonight. The county is holding the public hearing tomorrow. Other public hearings in the different jurisdictions are happening this week. The draft AFH is going to be available for public review and comment beginning August 1st through September 15th. And then we will take the AFH to the council for adoption on the 25th and submit to HUD by October 4th. And if you have any questions, hopefully I'm here.
All right, thank you so much. Any questions from council on this report?
I do, Mr.
Vice Mayor.
Thank you. For the public that's here, I know you mentioned that there's going to be a hearing in San Mateo. Can you state the time and location so that, thank you.
I have it. I know it's going to be in the Board of Supervisors building in Redwood City. I believe the time is 10 o'clock.
10 o'clock? Okay.
Yeah, I believe so.
So people have the opportunity if they want to attend. And then mentioned in the report that evictions were stated there. Do we have the data on what type of evictions have been taken place? And if so, what is that analysis?
I know that the basis for that was a report that the legal aid of San Mateo County prepared. Unfortunately, I don't have that specific report in front of me. I can get it to you soon, later.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Ms. Halligan?
Just a comment.
Ms. Christensen?
Vice Mayor Manalo and I represented Daly City at a workshop on this very issue. And a couple of things that they said about Daly City. Daly City is the most diverse city in all of San Mateo County. We have a fairly high disabled community in Daly City, even though many of our houses are not accessible to people with physical disabilities. But there was thought that because housing is a little bit less expensive here than it is in, say, Menlo Park or, Hillsborough or someplace like that, that people are forced to live here because it's more affordable, but still, the multiple stairs that we have provide an additional problem. And I think it might be interesting to know that I did talk to some of the people who presented later, and because we have such a high percentage of African American home ownership, that a number of those families are, as they age and are my age or older, seniors, are seeing the value of their houses being significant and looking at how many years they have left to live and are saying, I'm going to cash out and I'm going to move to live where my family and my children and my grandchildren live. So I see that as a positive thing in terms of people being able to get on with their lives and really reap the benefit of that economic boon of having the housing go up. And they also were talking about the evictions, a high number of our evictions are not based on behavior or breaking of the lease in terms of behavioral things, but it's economic. People cannot pay the increased rent that they were, had asked questions about that and had gotten a lot of response from the public, that it was an inability to pay increased rents. And so just some things to mull over in our minds. And overall, they said that San Mateo County, as far as fair housing and fair access, is significantly better than most places in the United States. So we can be proud of our multicultural community.
Thank you, Ms. Christensen. Any other further comment?
One last comment, Mr. Mayor.
Okay.
Yeah, and thank you, Ms. Christensen, for the synopsis at our meeting that we attended. I think also it just reinstates just the urgency that we need to be more aggressive around finding ways to put more affordable housing in Daly City. Whether it's inclusionary housing or if it's affordable housing, the data does show that we need to be more aggressive as a city to provide more opportunities as families can't afford to live in the city. The data shows it. I think we need to look at a more aggressive approach. So thank you.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Okay, any further comment on this? Ms. Sullivan?
Oh,
Good?
no.
All right, so we'll open it up to public hearing, and I don't have any cards on this one, so I request a motion to close the.
You have one? You have to turn it in.
Okay.
I wanted to listen first.
Okay.
Oh, okay, we're just, here, I'll pass it down. Yeah,
We got
there we go.
Sergio, huh? Okay, we have one, Mr. Sergio Robredo Maderazzo.
Thank you very much.
Welcome, Sergio. Good
Hi,
to see you.
Good to see you too. I appreciate the report and then the questions and comments after. It just sort of highlights, I mean, first, I think it's really important to recognize that this is, we're talking about discriminatory practices based on the, on civil rights, right, civil rights law. And unfortunately, it's wonderful that that law exists, of course, but that doesn't necessarily cover certain groups of people who aren't considered protected classes. And primarily, I'm looking at the questions about affordability, poverty, and really in this day and age, and the crisis, the housing crisis being what it is in Daly City and the Bay Area, it's not something that affects people who might be normally considered by census data to be living in, under poverty, in a poverty situation. So we have segments of our population that I work with as a teacher who can no longer afford to live and work in Daly City. My fellow teachers, my BIS members, folks who work in the schools. We heard a little bit today about how even police officers are struggling to be able to afford to live here. And so I do agree that we need to be more aggressive around affordable housing. I also would like to see some things brought up and considered around the things that I heard today around the questions about displacement, the questions about affordability and gentrification. And really, when I think about that, I think about the lack of protection that a lot of renters have, in addition to the affordability issue, that people simply can't afford to live here when rent increases keep happening, right? And they're not controlled. There is no control. We also don't have anything to protect people against, no-cause evictions. And so I really would like City Council to look at that, like what kinds of evictions are happening, and is there anything that we could do and be creative about, right, and really consider to try and address some sort of protections for renters, both in terms of rent increases and just cause eviction. So,
Thank you. Thank you so much. All right, Mr. Sergio was the only card that we have. Request a motion to close the public hearing at this time.
So moved.
Second.
First and second, further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, we just move on. That was just a report. Thank you, Ms. Mothershead and Ms. Selig-Gwynn. Thank you so much. Okay, next item on the agenda is item number 14, front yard parking regulations. And Mr. Lunkhausen, I did, Tatum, are you going to give it, or is Mike? Oh, okay. Good evening.
Paving.
Thank you, Honorable Mayor, members of the City Council. This item is a bit of a continuation of a previous conversation that we'd had when the ordinance regarding front yard paving was adopted in January. As the council will recall, we were going to come back with a more detailed report on the amnesty program, and that's partially why we're here tonight, as well as to review some of the policies that may be necessary to advance the front yard paving program in the city. Just to give a little background for some of the members of the public who may not be familiar with what the city's done to date. As part of a general plan implementation measure, the City Council in January 2017 adopted some amendments to the zoning ordinance, which essentially legalized and allowed some front yard paving in the city subject to design regulations. I'm going to go through what those were in a graphic better than looking at all these words. Essentially, the regulations adopted in 2017 allowed expanded driveways essentially throughout the city on lots that are wider than 25 feet at their frontage, the sidewalk. The zoning ordinance was amended to require that 25% of the front yard be retained in landscaping, and that's what's shown here as a landscape triangle, for example. Now, what this did was allowed some homeowners, and there are quite a few of them who over the years have indicated to the city, as well as have installed, actually gone ahead and installed expanded off driveway parking spaces, that this sort of a thing would be a welcome change to neighborhoods in terms of providing additional parking opportunities, as well as some homeowners just don't desire to have a front yard, and for maintenance purposes or other reasons. So this is what we developed through a council committee. Lots that are 25 feet or less in width would be allowed to completely replace their front yard with paving. The last item, again, that was adopted in January 2017 was the requirement for design enhancements to these paved areas. So that would have to be through decorative concrete, pavers, or similar material that was deemed attractive. And that's all, again, codified in the zoning ordinance at the present time. So the objective of the program was to provide off-street parking opportunities while minimizing visual impacts and maximizing compliance with city regulations. It's something that's important to note, that we try to develop a program, and again, this is just for the edification of the public who may be new to this topic. We tried to develop a program where we could maximize the public's compliance with our program. We wanted to come up with a realistic regulation that homeowners felt that they could actually comply with, and we think we did that. Of course, it's an ongoing program that is going to need evaluation from time to time because front yard paving's gone on for quite some time, and we're still dealing with how to legalize it, and that's part of why we're here tonight. These are some examples of front yard paving that occurred over time. And these are maybe some of the more attractive, especially the one on the right, sorts of examples of how front yard paving can be achieved while not necessarily impacting the aesthetic of the home. And essentially what the city's required, because parking wasn't allowed in these areas, has required a planter basically be plaqued smack dab in the middle of the paving area. And the changes in January did allow us to not require that be installed, but rather 25% again of the front yard be retained in landscaping.
So the one on the right there, if they took that little tiny square of whatever that little planter bush is out, then that would qualify, because it looks like that's certainly
Doesn't look like it qualifies.
25%.
Because there's no grass.
Yeah, well, together with all what's going on back here and this and the side,
And
this
along
could
the side?
possibly comply.
It's close.
Yeah.
Or they could, put a little something in front of the hedge.
Right.
Yeah.
So as I indicated at the outset of the presentation, this is a sort of a continuation of the discussion in January when the City Council adopted the regulations. We're coming back with a refinement or outline the amnesty program that would be put in place with your blessing. Permit requirement and fee, we have found it necessary to actually conduct some cost recovery as part of this program. as well as was indicated in January, we need to set a dollar amount after which persons who are remodeling their home would need to comply with the current regulations if they did not participate in the amnesty program. We've also come up with a couple of policy matters that need some discussion regarding the treatment of these of the existing driveways that are being retained. We require the new driveway to receive an enhancement such as paver or colored concrete. It's been pointed out to us, and it's a great observation that over time, the front yards are going to be a hodgepodge of materials where the existing concrete and the new concrete don't match. And so this is something that, though, that would be an additional cost to homeowners. And again, it was a important thing for us to make sure that the front yard paving program could be something that homeowners could actually want to comply with, because it wouldn't add necessarily all that much more expense. And then the last item is a policy that waives the requirement for additional parking for homeowners who desire to construct modest additions. What we found is that we are, in some instances, forcing people to pave front yard areas that possibly through just a modest addition they wouldn't need to pave, and we'll go through why we feel that may not necessarily be a great approach. Maybe we could have some flexibility with regard to that area. So there's essentially 5 discussion topics on front yard paving tonight, unless the City Council desires to add anything else. So the amnesty program is, in a nutshell, that any single family dwelling or duplex property with contiguous front yard paving that existed prior to July 1st, 2017 would be considered legal nonconforming if they went through the city's amnesty program. The city staff is recommending that the City Council adopt a requirement that homeowners, property owners file with the Planning Division prior to January 31st, 2018 to secure this nonconformity finding determination. That would give us ample time to use the Daily Wire. The city's utility billing system will be a major way we get the word out on this, as well as the cable television channel, to communicate to homeowners and property owners the ability to file for the amnesty program. Any driveways that have been cited by code enforcement after July 2017 would automatically be disqualified, because we've had quite a number of months for persons to comply with the regulations. We don't feel that it's fair to keep going with that.
I have a quick question. So if a person has a driveway and then they have a stone or brick side driveway, and they photograph that and they bring that in, then is that something that you consider?
It would be something that we consider.
Yes.
We are going to review the applications with the city's Public Works Department and make sure that none of the concrete placement or paver placement jeopardizes any public infrastructure, fire hydrants,
right.
things like this.
Or water meters or
Water
anything
meters,
like that.
exactly.
Yeah, okay.
So they'll be reviewed on a case-by-case basis, but yes, that would be an example of.
I did notice in your report that just the permits alone is going to be basically $500. I mean, $495, but 500, close enough.
Well, the city already charges for an encroachment permit, and that's the cost of that.
Yeah.
That permit's already in place. That permit requirement and fee is already in place for the engineering division to review. It includes a couple of inspections, so there's a cost recovery for Public Works to inspect work done in the public right-of-way. The fee that I'd mentioned previously is one that would be charged by the Planning Division to take in applications. It's basically 1 hour staff time. We'll go through that, but that's essentially what that is. So driveways that are not in the program, in the amnesty program, would be subject to continued ticketing, as well as eventual compliance should the property owner submit a building permit and receive a building permit for work valued at $50,000 or more. And this is what we're proposing, the $50,000 to the City Council. The City Council can say, no, that's too much, too little, and we can communicate to you the implications of changing that.
So the question about the $50,000, that means if I have a funky add-on to my driveway, that I would have to redo it?
You may
But
have
I'm
to
not
redo it.
forced to put anything there if I do $50,000 and don't want to put any driveway there. Or, it's not a requirement to have off-driveway parking.
No.
It's a requirement to bring it up to a certain level of aesthetic and code, whatever.
That's right.
If
That's
I-
right.
okay.
And $50,000 is, just so the council's
Mm-hmm.
aware, I mean, that is the cost of a nice kitchen remodel.
Right.
It would definitely include any additions to the home, this sort of thing. It probably wouldn't be a complete window replacement on the home. That would probably be less than $50,000.
Yeah.
So it's
And
a
the roof
targeted
doesn't
amount.
count.
Roofs usually aren't
Don't count,
$50,000, right? So, and it's only a single building permit. It's not
Right.
anything that says, $50,000 of improvements over a one-year period or anything
Yeah.
like that. So, the $50,000 amount is targeted toward, it's supposed to be if a homeowner is proposing a substantial upgrade to their home. Then we start looking at what the front yard looks like and gaining compliance with the 25% rule. Installing decorative concrete pavers. So this just outlines the permit requirement and fee. As I'd indicated, the fee we're proposing for planning cost recovery is $165. Again, Public Works already charges the 400 and something odd dollars. Councilmember Christensen indicated. This is a 1 hour of staff time, essentially. We figure on average that's what we would spend. We'd call it a front yard paving permit, again, for paving projects proposed after January 31st, 2018. We didn't think it was fair to charge people who were voluntarily complying within the amnesty program a fee, and so this would only be effective after, again, that date of January 31st, 2018. On the topic of replacing the existing driveway with new front yard paving, so and we can cut to a graphic if any of the council members need that. But essentially, a lot of people have existing driveways, of course, and some people come in and say, well, I want to expand my driveway. The city regulations currently require that be decorative concrete or pavers, something that is a higher end material than the existing driveway. It's been pointed out to the city staff correctly that having higher end material as the new the driveway expansion, but leaving the old driveway is going to, over time, could potentially, and it's probably true, result in a visual hodgepodge of existing concrete, new different concrete within neighborhoods. And so the city staff thought it may be worthwhile to explore the potential for requiring that the existing concrete come out and the whole thing be replaced with a decorative material. Yes, and that is true. It is expensive, and we have some graphics that show what that might look like. We wanted to propose some options for the city council to consider, and one of them is just replacing the whole driveway. That's number one. Number two is requiring that the new front yard paving be tinged gray. The staff report outlines some of the shortfalls and the benefits of these different options, and on number two, we don't know if we'd get the gray quite right as the existing concrete. So there's some risk involved with that. The third option, which is the one that we're recommending, but also has some pitfalls, is that we require that all new front yard paving be a grass paver, and we have some visuals that show you what that looks like. Turf stone, similar product. Probably the biggest problem with this is that we as the staff sort of wonder if local contractors are familiar with this product, and that doesn't mean that if we require it that they can't familiarize themselves with it. But again, we're trying to have a program that is easy to comply with. The installation of this sort of a product needs to be, it's a professional installation. It requires a sub-drained sort of a system of aggregate base underneath the material so that it drains properly, so that the vehicles that are on top of it don't crush it. So it's a little bit more technical, if you will, to be installed. And so, even though we do recommend that because it's sort of a compromise, if you will, it has an aesthetic benefit, but still provides the homeowner with the ability to park on it. It is what we're recommending, although it definitely has some shortcomings, and we wanted to point those out to you. The fourth option is to keep the regulations as they are and to monitor the aesthetic implications of doing so. we can always come back to the city council in a meeting like this and say, hey, this is, we've noticed on the street this, is not working. We need to make some changes to the program. This program will evolve. It's something that's controversial. It's not perfect, and we recognize that. And maybe number 4 is the way to go. But that's obviously keeping things as the regulations as they are is an option. So we wanted to provide some graphics that show, sort of the problem. On the left is a picture of front yard paving, where this doesn't comply with the 25% requirement. But not only that, there's no enhanced paving, and so this is sort of what we're trying to avoid on the left. The homeowner on the right, and this is all voluntary. This doesn't comply with the 25% requirement either, I don't think. But they've replaced the entire driveway with pavers. And some people would think that this is aesthetically beneficial. You just take the whole existing driveway out, replace the new driveway and the existing driveway with paver material. One of the shortfalls of this, or issues with this, is that, and we've discussed this with persons that are desiring to pave their front yard and floating the idea past them, is that it's going to be very expensive. It essentially doubles the cost of a front yard paving project. And some people say, well, that's great. They just won't be able to do it. What we find, though, is that instead of not doing it, people just do it on Saturday. So we're trying to develop a regulation that people can actually comply with. So even though that's the best thing aesthetically, it probably is the best thing. It is more expensive, and the city council probably can surmise what some of the implications of that. Just basically reduced compliance, but again, that's a possibility. Some more graphics showing match and no match. So the homeowner on the left has tried to do some sort of decorative matching, and see it's been some success anyway. But that would probably be the closest thing to if we did nothing. We'd probably have, over time, the concrete sort of blends in, but again, not the greatest thing in the world aesthetically, at least in our opinion. And then on the right, there's no matching of material. This is sort of this is the issue that we're having, is that the new material doesn't match the old. And it's a personal opinion.
Kind of a modern art thing, yeah.
So, but the concern is that this repeated house after house after house.
Yeah, with different colors at
different
each one,
colors is going to be aesthetically not
challenging,
the greatest,
perhaps.
Yeah, no. So this is a graphic that shows the grass pavers. Again, these are the pavers that have to be installed professionally for a vehicle to roll over.
And you have to mow them, right?
Well, I think the idea is that cars would probably park on it and take care of that. Probably be what happened. But yeah, they could be mowed, and there's a potential for weeds growing through this material if it's not used for parking. It does require some maintenance. Again, the installation of this has to be done by somebody who's experienced in doing it. Just to avoid siltation flowing through the top of the material, making sure that the water is perking down to the soil. So there's definitely some risks with this, but we do see it as a possible compromise between.
So this is probably the most environmental.
It's best environmental, yes.
How much is something like that?
We actually don't have a cost figure. It is more expensive than installing a traditional, because of the subsurface preparation that needs to occur. It is more expensive, but it is a good question, and we can provide you with that information. But so now we're moving into a new topic, but that's the issue with the whether to require the existing driveway be replaced or not topic. So the last issue is we've had a number of homeowners who have proposed additions that are actually not terribly large additions, less than 500 square feet, usually in the neighborhood between 200 and 300 square feet, where they are staying within their parking provision class, and the next slide will show what that is. They're not going into the next class, so they're not increasing their degree of nonconformity, and they do not desire to pave their front yards due to the aesthetic implications of it. And those homeowners have asked the city staff to discuss this with the city council of having a policy that would allow, again, modest additions within the parking class while not requiring that front yard paving be installed.
And that would be because the increase would require additional parking spots.
That's right, exactly. So, for example, if a homeowner had a 1,600 square foot home and they wanted to install an addition that was, say, 300 square feet and go to 1,900 square feet, the 1,900 square foot home doesn't breach the 2001 parking class.
Mm-hmm.
So there would be no need to increase to the 4 parking spaces. So prior to the zoning revisions that were adopted in January, the city did have a 105 square foot exemption, if you will, where homeowners could add on without complying with the current parking regulations. So this actually isn't a terribly large expansion of that previous policy. We do think it's fair. It's really not our desire to promote or require front yard paving when it's not, absolutely necessary. And so we do think that this is something that is a fair change to the policy, if you will. The city council does agree to do that. So that's essentially it. These are the parking tiers, just to remind the council members of what they are and provide examples.
Yeah, I have a question. With the new state law that says accessory dwelling units can be put in a home with the same footprint or a larger footprint, you cannot require additional parking spots. How does that fit with this?
Any portion of a single-family home that is devoted toward an accessory dwelling unit is not charged for parking.
Regardless of whatever it is.
That's state law, and it's the city's law now.
So if you're adding on to a single-family residence without an accessory
then we
dwelling
start,
unit, because
yeah.
the state wants to give a bonus to people who are adding more property for people to live in, additional families.
That's right.
Right, okay. Now, question 2, so if you have a person now who is, let's say, in a house built in the early part of the 1900s and has no parking spot, no garage, no driveway, how does this affect them if they wanted to add on a little bit to their house? Would they then pop up into having parking spots, or?
Well, the policy, how it would affect them is if they didn't breach any of the classes, my take would be is that we wouldn't charge for parking. No portion of an accessory dwelling unit that they proposed is charged for parking.
Right, would count at all. So if they want to put an accessory dwelling unit, they're fine, but if they want to expand their home, that's now probably 1,200 square feet or whatever, that would pop up into the 1,500 or more, then they'd be required to have the 2 parking spots. Gotcha.
Under the policy that we're considering tonight.
Yeah.
Yes.
Great, thanks.
What was the square footage for the accessory dwelling units?
The maximum square feet is based on the size of the principal unit.
Okay.
The maximum square feet of an accessory dwelling unit can't exceed 50% of the size or the number of square feet, that is, of the principal unit.
And then, for instance, there was a resident or a home that wanted to expand, but they don't actually have, like some homes in Daly City, they don't have like a front yard. How does that parking, how would they, be able to add those additional parking spaces if they don't have a front yard? I mean, there's some areas around kind of the old Daly City areas.
Well, this was the reason why the city adopted the regulations that it did. So the council's tonight considering a policy that would allow them to, if they stay within their square foot class, if you will, they could add on a modest, I would think. But if they breach the 1501, 2001, 2,500 square foot in the example that you're providing, then we would say, hey, you've got to give us some parking. And if they can't do that, then they can't do the addition.
Oh, yeah. Well, what if they don't have space, like a front yard? So what's the?
There'd be no out for that situation.
Oh, okay.
That's part of the reason for the regulation.
So they could
And that's
put
always
in-
been
yeah.
a regulation.
Yeah.
Even before January,
Right.
the city always required at least 2 parking spaces to construct an addition greater than 105 square feet. So
Thank
that
you.
But they could put in an accessory dwelling unit.
they could actually put in an
Yes.
accessory dwelling unit
Yeah.
subject to all, yeah.
Okay. It's a little complex. I'm getting a brain workout here.
Yeah. Yeah. So actually, in that situation, the policy would be a bit more liberal than the policy that existed prior to January, which allowed only 105. This could allow, up to 499 square feet.
Yeah.
But usually, that's not the case. Usually, people have, 1,700 and they want to add 200 or something like
Yeah.
that. That's usually what way it really is.
Thank you.
So that, I think, is the last topic. The staff recommends the city council review the policies of the amnesty program and the policies discussed and provide any input the council has to staff.
Can you go back to the slide that shows the boat, there, that one, the one that you just had, the boat with the boat, the one before it? No, there you go. So if a homeowner wanted to put, pave it so that they could park another vehicle, are there any rules or regulations regarding, like, say that boat, for example, can they
Can't park it
keep
there.
that boat there if they add on?
Nope.
In other words, can it just sit there?
I think boats isn't. Yeah. This might not have been the greatest example because of that thing there, but yeah.
They're not allowed to keep the.
Yeah, they can be cited
For keeping the boat there.
storage.
And then, the question about adding another space to park another car, are there any limits to how long that car can remain there?
It's private
I
property.
don't know. In the front yard parking.
It's private property.
I don't believe we have a restriction on how long the vehicle can be there, but if it appears to be abandoned and that, it's on blocks and it's not operable,
Yeah.
the police department can enforce that and require the removal.
Okay.
I know in my neighborhood, when you've got one or more flat tires and the grass is about 6 to 8 inches tall around the wheels, they ticket them.
Okay. And then can you go to the slide that shows the grass pavers?
Oh, the grass pavers.
Yeah, that, so, do you know if there's any regulations regarding how that lawn is to be maintained or watered? Like, is there gonna be an underwater sprinkler system? It has to be over water? Do you know?
That would not be part of our regulation to require any irrigation. We're actually sort of moving away from requiring irrigated material.
Okay.
If they installed that and to be honest, and installed the decomposed granite sort of material that went into that, that would probably be fine with us so long as the material that went in could percolate water.
So, and this probably is an odd question, but I'm wondering if a homeowner has a lawn, is there a regulation that prevents someone from just parking on that lawn?
Yes.
There is.
That's not allowed.
And what's the reason for that?
Well, the reason for that is that the city wants to make sure that any of the like oil and things like that don't affect the soil underneath. It's also just an aesthetic thing, quite frankly. I think those are the basic rationales.
Okay.
If we allowed people to park on, non-concreted or not, hardscape surface, it just wouldn't look good.
Okay.
Right, and it also tracks dirt and
Yeah.
material into the public right of way that can ultimately find its way into the storm drain system.
And what about the, you mentioned the oil. What regulation do we have that monitors if you have a leaky oil on your own driveway and now you have two spots that might be affected?
Mhm. We really don't regulate oil dripping. I mean, if it was really bad and excessive, we do have code enforcement people that deal with, illicit discharge. If you had a car that just was gushing oil, the city could go after you for that.
And then, so the driveway, I think it's called the lip, when you go up the little
apron.
ramp. Okay, what is it called?
The apron.
The apron. Why did I say lip? So does that require you to also expand that lip?
Actually, the city's public works department can review cases for expanding the driveway apron on a case-by-case basis. And in instances where the on-street parking count won't be impacted, the public works department could allow for a widened apron. But again, those sorts of things are not actually in the purview of the zoning ordinance because they're in the public right-of-way. That's completely within the discretion of that department. We want to make sure that none of what we're doing here is intended to impact on-street parking.
Mm-hmm.
So if people expand their driveway, the automatic question to can I expand my apron is no.
Mm-hmm.
But we'll review those on a case-by-case basis.
And so the allowance to build an extra or move space, that's the entire citywide?
Is
Everywhere in Daly City they could do that?
It is, but it's different on lots that are wider than 25 feet, which are essentially Westlake, St. Francis, Saramani, Southern Hills. But the older parts of the city where the lots are 25 feet or sometimes less, we do allow complete paving of that, subject to design guidelines.
Okay, thanks. Very helpful.
Mr. Lunkhausen, thank you so much. I have a few questions. I know a lot has gone into this, and I'll make some comments later. I want to start off, can you go back a couple of slides, please? Forward, back. Right, oh, okay, I'll accept that one. Both those, even though they spent a lot of money on the one on the right, that's not in compliance.
I don't believe so. We require 25% of this lot be retained in landscaping.
Yeah, I don't see any grass there at an angle.
On the right, there's a little
Yeah,
bit.
there's a little bit over here.
Yeah, but it's not as a triangle as you made.
It wouldn't have to be, right?
That's true. It doesn't necessarily have to be a triangle. We shoot for the triangle.
Okay. Now, what's to prevent an owner, in that particular case on the right, putting two cars facing at 45 degrees?
There really isn't. Aside from that, it would be hard to do that.
I think if that boat trailer wasn't there, and then they pull way up, make a sharp left turn, and then pull another car up, make another sharp left
may be
turn,
able to.
and then put a car into the driveway.
You
It
think
depends
you
on the
get
order
three
you
on
take
there?
them. Oh, yeah, put three.
Or if you had smart cars,
Yeah.
See, what I think
okay.
is that lends to the decrease in the aesthetics of the property. Now, I received a letter, let's say a particular homeowner has 25-foot frontage and is currently set for 3 parking spots. And what they're doing is they're doing a modification to their home where, say, for instance, they're taking out a wall. So where you have 2 bedrooms next to each other, they decide to take out the wall, so you're gonna make it 1 bedroom. They haven't increased the habitants, but all they're doing is something on the inside. But their home is 2,400 feet, which is the 4th threshold on there, which requires 4 parking spots. Does that owner get penalized they won't?
No, they won't. And usually it's the opposite. They're making more bedrooms.
They're making more, well, they're decreasing the bedroom size.
Even if they were increasing the bedroom.
Right.
The square footage.
It wouldn't
Of
matter
the,
either way.
okay,
It doesn't change the parking requirement.
all right.
But that is true. It's a good observation.
Okay, and I remember being on the planning commission when we first talked about this, and a lot of work has gone into this. And Daly City, we're trying to address, I think this is a twofold issue. One, we were trying to address the parking issues. And what is happening in one neighborhood does not necessarily apply to another neighborhood. Say, for instance, on the northeast side of Daly City, northeast. It's different than what happens to other parts of Daly City. So I think to make it citywide would really not be a good thing. That's one part. The other part, as I see we're coming out with this ordinance, is to kind of prevent in-law units. And, well, no, you're making hear me out, please. If somebody creates an in-law unit downstairs without a permit, we do not have the right to knock on that door. We want to check to see if you have a permit to what you're doing. Only if you see the construction materials on the front, and it's something known as plain view, where a neighbor can make that complaint, that gives us authority to look into it. However, if the owner submits for a permit, say has an illegal in-law unit, but he or she wants to add an addition in the back, that would trigger us to go in and see, oh, well, wait a minute, you have this other room here, you didn't get a permit to do that, and that's when we get them. That's why I'm taking this aspect is the double-sided sword to say this can also assist in us finding permit violations, because part of the complaint, which is the increase in parking, is the creation of in-law units to which a permit has never been obtained. Mm-hmm. Have we thought about that as to?
I think with the paving, there wouldn't be any requirement to go in that long-term inspection.
For the paving, but they would have to get a building permit in order to do the paving for compliance.
It would be a planning permit only.
Okay. Yep. All right. And the other question I have, being prior law enforcement, if somebody parks a vehicle in their driveway and put it up on blocks, that's private property. The city should have no business in, I mean, it doesn't look good, but the city can't.
It's a safety issue.
The city, okay, forget the blocks. If somebody puts a vehicle in the driveway and don't use the car, it doesn't have grass growing underneath it, and the city can't mandate that you move your car from a private property.
To be clear, the abandoned vehicle section of the ordinance is not part of the zoning ordinance, so that's not something the planning division enforces. It's actually in, I believe, I don't know for sure, but I believe it's in vehicle parking and traffic, which is enforced by the police department.
I agree with you. So parked in traffic, if they're parked on the outside of the sidewalk, which is the right-of-way where anybody can park, then you can enforce a 72-hour provision, but not in your driveway that's off of the
Actually, the abandoned vehicle allows for it to be taken off of their driveway with the proper notification. And we've actually enforced it through the police department on several occasions.
Okay. Well, I'd like to follow up on that because I'm not too happy with this provision unless we get more. And the last issue I have, as I made mention, is neighborhoods are different. And have we reached out to the various neighborhoods, maybe even based on population, and get their input?
No, we haven't sent direct notice to each of the neighborhoods. We have had some communication with individuals in the community who have requested to be informed of this topic, but no, we haven't done that on this particular issue.
Thank you so much. I believe that that's very, very important. A confused mind will always say no, and if we can advise the community of everything that we're doing and giving them a chance to speak on the matter, at least, decisions that we make, they would finally understand. All right, I have no further comments from the dais unless any council member has anything further. I have 3 cards on this subject. I would like to open this up to public hearing if I may. A motion to open up the public hearing.
Can I just ask one quick question?
Yes, Councilmember.
The landscaped area, would large
Oh.
potted trees be appropriate in that area too, but in a pot so that it doesn't, the roots are not a problem?
There's no reason, unless it, again, if it interfered with a city utility.
Right,
that
I'm
would be an
thinking
issue.
that's why, I've seen some very large potted trees, because the problem with the city is the roots and the sewer system.
Yes.
But as long as it's planted and attractive
Yeah,
and,
and it depends on the
Yeah,
tree too.
yeah.
There are different trees have different root systems.
yes,
so.
that's why the pot contains some of them. Great, thank you.
Yeah, with a pot, it would have to be a permanent fixture if it, yeah.
Yes, big monster pot, yeah.
Okay, thank you so much. We now have 4 cards. I don't need the motion to open up the public hearing, so we'll just call up the individual folks. We'll first call up Mr. Richard Swan, and after Mr. Swan, Mr. Bill Helms, if you can get ready. Good evening, Mr. Swan.
Good evening. The business of paving the yards is tangled up also with the accessory dwelling units and the junior accessory dwelling units. And let me tell you that I've held the state legislation in my hand, and I know the city has very little wiggle room.
Yep.
The state's language is that the municipalities are to encourage the building of accessory dwelling units, what we might call in-law apartments. City's got no choice in that. However, the state legislation and the city zone regulations say that if you add ADUs or JADUs to a property that's within a half a mile of public transportation, you cannot require additional parking spaces. And I would have to look a long ways to find a spot in Daly City that's not within a half mile of a bus stop. 20 years ago, we didn't have a parking problem around here.
Because nobody had.
What's changed? The family sizes have gone down. And what's changed is we've allowed speculators to come in, buy houses, put in extra units, and turn them into rooming houses. Now, the city zone ordinance regarding ADUs and what have you, whereas it was given the option, it took a good option in protecting us, is that when you put an ADU into a house or a JADU, which basically is an extra room, but it must have a sink, and you must have a plug-in cooking device, no gas lines, okay? House has to be owner occupied. Before you can get your permit, you've got to prove that it's owner occupied. And I'll tell you, if I went down my street and pointed at the houses that have additional units, I would bet money not one is owner occupied. And if they were owner occupied, we'd see the lawns maintained, all right? We'd see the houses painted and kept up, and that's not happening. So the other thing is that because we're allowing the speculators to come in, they're driving the prices up. We had a problem with the affordability
Okay,
of housing
Mr.
in
Swan, you
town.
have to finish up, please.
It's because we're allowing this to happen. We're not policing our own regulations. If we made them owner occupied, we'd cut the cost of housing and we'd improve the availability and we'd cut down on the parking problem. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Swan. Mr. Bill Helms, and then we'll have Bob Quinn. So, Mr. Helms,
Thank
good
you,
evening,
Mayor.
sir.
I appreciate it. I'd like to address your previous statement about letting you put a car on blocks in your front yard. I lived in Alaska. You really don't want to let that happen because you'll have all kind of crap in your front yard. Excuse my language. I'd like to reinforce what Mr. Spahn said. I walk around the neighborhoods a lot for my constitution, and I see some really nice concreting over, graveling over, fake grass. And I see a lot of yards just going to pot. Not pot literally, but just not being watered and not looking good and everything like that. And we're very concerned in my neighborhood. I live in Westlake. A lot of the homes are being bought up and they're trying to turn them into rooming houses. And if we let them pave over the yards, we're going to turn it into a ghetto, student ghetto, whatever ghetto. And I really think y'all be real careful about letting them pave over yards. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Helms. Mr. Bob Quinn.
I think they must be out of order there.
Thank you.
It says 14 and 15. Okay, put you on for, thank you, Mr. Quinn. Ms. Karen Boyle. Good evening, ma'am.
I'm just concerned about the paving in the area too. I live out in the Westlake neighborhood, and I don't want to live in a concrete jungle, and I think that's what it's going to become. There's like 10 kids that live on our block, and they play up and down the street, and I'm just concerned if there's cars everywhere. I also want to know how many cars, is there going to be a rule how many cars you can park on your front lawn? In your pictures, there's 2, but people are going to try and stick more cars up there. I'm very concerned about that. I'm also glad that you're concerned about aesthetics. I think that's really important. And at least in the paver one, some water may get down into the like aquifers or whatever. And I just wonder, can the sidewalk support how many cars you park? If you're putting 3 cars in front of a house, can the cement or the sidewalk support it all? It's just my concerns.
Thank you, Ms. Boyle. Next, we have a Julie O'Callahan. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Julie O'Callahan, and I also agree with the concerns raised by the people who spoke previously. I'm also concerned about the aesthetics, and I'm glad you guys are, as well as the safety. As you asked, Mr. Mayor, you know, if there was 3 cars parked in like that house on the right, they'd have to be parked at 45-degree angles and one next to them. People are already speeding up and down the roads. I see people making illegal U-turns, and trying to back out of that while people are walking by or children playing creates a big safety concern that I'm not sure that this committee has thought about. And I agree that we do need to be concerned about the aesthetics. There's a boarding house that's moved in right across from me. I don't think the owner lives there because he comes in and asks if there's a problem with the parking. There is a problem with the parking, yet nobody in that house parks in the driveway. For some reason, the driveway is left open. And I just would urge the council to think long and hard about what we're creating by allowing people to park in the driveways. This might not be popular, but if we are looking to kind of do something about the parking and create revenue, why don't we consider having a parking permit like every other city to raise revenue? And it would get people moving the cars off the streets instead of them sitting there 5 days in a row or 4 days in a row. But I think we need to be careful about what we want to put in just to ease the parking. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. O'Callahan. We have a Michelle and Darrell Draper. Good evening, welcome.
We put the wrong number on our original
the wrong-
form, so I wanted to make sure we were able to speak, and thank you for this time. We fall into the category of looking for a waiver, so to your point, all neighborhoods are different, and we're the ones who you quoted our letter, so thank you for reading it, which is we are putting a modest improvement in our home under like 237 square feet, and the requirement to add an additional parking space. Well, we're decreasing the density of our home, so we are the ones that are taking down the wall, and we're actually making an office, so there's less people living there. Currently, there's only myself and my husband, and we're just trying to improve our home for our personal use. And all neighborhoods are different, and in front of our lawn, where it's a 25-foot lawn, is our beautiful bay window that we would be looking over our beautiful parked car, which I'm being sarcastic. We don't think that that's very beautiful. And so we're looking for that flexibility where you're able to go in and look at every project and really look at what is the intent or the purpose, because we would not like to put pavement over our very, very small landscaping opportunity. And I think it goes to everything that's been said by the others, which is really maintaining the beauty, the aesthetic, and the neighborhood feel of our community. And so that's what we're asking for consideration.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Okay, I have no further cards, and at this particular time, we'll close public communications on this. So there's a motion on the floor. I mean, there's not a motion, but the recommended action is to adopt the resolution. So I would need a motion to adopt the
But
resolution.
what exact requirement are we talking about here? Because you gave us a list of things to look at, right, to consider?
So, we'd like to know, is the amnesty program acceptable? Was the permit requirement and fee acceptable? Was the $50,000 evaluation, the trigger for compliance acceptable? We need some direction on the concept of removing the existing driveway and replacing the whole driveway with new material. We presented some options for that, and then the last was regarding the last speaker's assertion, and again, there have been others where there are modest improvements, and if they're staying within their parking class, if you will, that front yard paving wouldn't be required. Just 5 things to consider.
Thank you, Mr. Lockhausen.
Mr. Mayor, let me give you my thoughts, if I may. I will say I'm a bit ambivalent. I mean, there were some issues that were raised by a lot of members of the audience and also people on the council, including you, about having first having more people know about this and having the public weigh in, because I was very interested in the comments of the audience members today, and I think there's going to be more of that, and I'd like to hear more. As Mr. Von Longcoxen said, there wasn't really an outreach for that, and I think that's important. I also, I thought the point you made about whether or not this should be, citywide, or should we consider making it only applicable to certain neighborhoods that need the parking. So I think that discussion should continue and really be fleshed out. So I'm wondering if it is in the best interest of our community to continue the dialogue and give the notice to the public and get more input. I see, I see both sides to having an agreement to all of this, but I just think this is kind of a big, huge decision for a lot of people in where they live, and I think it's more important that we give more time to it. That's
Thank you, Councilmember Buenaventura. I want to try to follow, and granted, I'm going to give everyone on the council a chance to talk on this matter, but I think in following parliamentary protocol, we should determine if there's a motion to move forward with this first, and then we can have a discussion. If we don't move forward, then we don't have to engage in discussion, but we can definitely put our comments out there. So whatever my colleagues want to do, if you want to have continued discussion on this, we can do this before making a motion, or if there's any motion.
I prefer to discuss first.
Okay.
That'd be my preference. I don't know
All
about the
right.
rest of you.
Okay, I'm good. So we've given Councilmember Buenaventura a chance. Ms. Christensen, did you want to make any comment?
First of all, it's already law that we can have a an off driveway parking. That was passed in January. Now the question tonight is, what are the rules going to be, this very specific rules about how that's going to happen. It seems like number 4 is the only place where we have a difference of opinion. The amnesty program, I don't know if there's a problem with that. The fees and permits, and the trigger for compliance, the remodeling thing, and the waiver for people who are making a very small addition that does not send them into another category. So it looks to me like number 4 is how you're going to do it, what kind of pavers might be needed, and how much has to be redone. And I do notice that the speakers who were against this are all from the west side of 280. Mr. Gangona and myself live on the east side of 280, where parking is substantially worse. The density is much higher. The houses are older. Many have no driveway, no garage, and those that do have a driveway or garage have one driveway, one garage. So the actual pressure for parking is even greater. We also have larger families fitting in a single-family home. So the actual quality of life pressure that parking puts on people is significantly greater on the east side of town than on the west side of town. So there's a couple of ways we might go tonight. One is to approve 1, 2, 3, and 5. We may look at number 4 and say, I think the east side of town is happy with anything that gives them more parking. You know, the 2 pieces of concrete that don't match, hey, concrete's concrete, it's all gray, it'll all be, you know, some shade of gray at some point. I can't, if you told any of my neighbors that they could have an additional parking spot, and to think about what that would do to their quality of life, they're not going to have to carry those groceries from 3 blocks away. They're going to come home from work and maybe actually have a place to park that second car, because it takes 2 people minimum to support a mortgage or even rent these days. And I don't know if there's significant concern on the west side. I don't know, maybe let y'all just duke it out on that issue and see what people can come up with. But, well, you live on the east side of town too, right, Miss Manalo? Huh?
I do.
Yeah, yeah, and I know your family does. So, I don't know what your feelings are on it, but
Just as a point of
maybe we
clarification.
could agree with what we can and.
Go ahead, Mike.
The third option, the
Uh-huh.
staff was recommending that would only apply to lots that are greater than 25 feet in width.
Which is not.
Oh,
and
okay.
On the east side of town, there are 25 by 100 lots, which this wouldn't apply to,
Okay,
correct?
so then the
So with
Saramonte, St. Francis, and Westlake people, number 3 only applies to them, and maybe a few places in Southern Hills.
You can apply that concept to any of the options, actually. I mean,
So as
But
long as,
there aren't any lawns in my neighborhood.
I probably got more lawn than anybody planting, and it's, you know, just flowers.
so probably one of the greatest demand areas for front yard paving is the St. Francis neighborhood. So if
Yeah.
you want to think about, you know, where you're going to see them, in Westlake, it's definitely increasing. That's true.
Yeah.
But where we've seen just historically and on an ongoing basis is St. Francis, and Ceremony too, I think, is also another.
Okay, so now I'm confused. So 3 doesn't apply to the
East side at all.
If you,
As
other than in a
proposed.
few places in Southern Hills. So it doesn't apply to Hillside, the Crocker, Original,
Nothing with
none of those.
25.
No, we're all 25.
Those are
maybe
mostly a
maybe
lot of
26
25-foot wide
feet,
lots.
but nobody's going to measure it.
So it is, so sort of a way to think of this is, if
Yeah.
you increase the design requirement on lots
Yeah.
greater than 25 feet in width, you
Yeah.
do effectively, although we need to be careful with this, I
Yeah.
think. Because again, we're
Good
trying
at
to
pass
roll a
everything but 3
program
and
out
bring
that
that
is
back.
palatable to people, or not.
Mm-hmm.
The city council can, you know, require very high-end driveway replacement projects, but then we would, you know, I think
Mm-hmm.
that the compliance rate would fall.
So,
It's got to be balanced.
so what is the pleasure of my colleagues? Can we approve 1, 2, and 4 tonight and continue number 3 for the communities that have more concern about the aesthetics? I don't know, what is your feeling? Because it sounds like the community wants to have some more input on those lots that are larger than 25 feet.
It's
Vi-
1, 2, 3, and 5, just for clarification, because we had the wrong slide up.
Yeah.
Vice Mayor.
2, 3, and 5, yeah,
Thank
yeah, okay, depending on how you number
Yeah,
them,
4 is
yeah,
the only one that you continue.
yeah.
Well, I think there needs to be definitely more input around this discussion. There's definitely, as you mentioned, thank you for your input on where the areas are of need and where those permits are being actually where it's happening. And so for me, I think more input is necessary.
Thank you, Vice Mayor.
I'd like to make a motion if we're ready to do that, or
Well, I
would
have-
you like to comment some
Yes,
more?
please.
Absolutely. You let me know when when you're ready for a motion.
Yes, ma'am. Again, I'm concerned about the community and the different aspects of different neighborhoods. They all have different means and necessities. I heard a great suggestion tonight, to which, prior to coming on to the council had discussed this before, and I think this is something we need to revisit, and I would not want to revisit if I didn't hear it again tonight. And that is, what about the issue about parking permits in different neighborhoods so we can alleviate some of this congestion? And also, I'm concerned with item number 3 as to council being able to determine a threshold to trigger compliance. Right now, it's 50 grand. And if it's more, then we wouldn't have to worry. But if it's less, we might have more compliance issues, and it gives us an opportunity to go in and force compliance. So that's something we also have to consider. That's my thought. But I think the community, and at least us hearing from the community, is very important. I think if we can get more ideas for possible solutions. I mean, it's a good ordinance, but I just don't feel that the community was given a chance to get involved along the way. And I would feel much better knowing that it passes the Swan test and sleep well at night. No offense, Mr. Swan, but I have to sleep well at night.
Just
all I
to
have.
interject a thought,
Yes.
the council could, at a minimum, consider item number 5 about the minimal additions. There are some people that are interested in allowing, additions that are modest in nature to, this actually reduces the front yard paving requirement. So it's something just to consider and throw out and point out to you that that's sort of something for different consideration.
Okay, so I'd like to make a motion that we approve item number 1, number 2, number 3, and number 5, and that number 4 continue with more community input and more discussion and more decisions made later.
Second.
First and the second. Any discussion, further discussion on this matter? I'll make a comment. I don't think we listened to Mr. Lonkhausen and what he had made mention, especially with item number 5, to provide more community input also in this area. I also made mention about the remodeling trigger for compliance. We haven't come to a consensus as to what's going to trigger that amount. So to come right out and just say, approve it, I feel uncomfortable with it. Okay. Hearing.
Mr. Lonkhausen, could you review what the trigger is that's specific in this? It's $50,000,
$50,000.
right?
That's correct. I mean, I think ideally, if we wanted to, if it seems like there's some disagreement, and actually 4 is somewhat associated with 1, 2, and 3. If we just went ahead with 5, I suppose, that's something that could be considered as well, although we are supposed to, at some point, set up, the ordinance is already adopted about whether to allow front yard paving or not. These are just the more specifics, and there's an amnesty program that's supposed to go into effect. Although that could be delayed, number 5 is an item that would allow people who have proposed modest additions, such as the Drapers who spoke to you, to proceed with those without having to pave their front lawn. And I think that that's something that it seems like there's
I think universal support.
Well,
All right,
So
further
we
discussion?
should just take the vote and then move on to another motion if
Okay,
one fails.
good. So, is there further discussion on the motion? On the motion to approve items number 1, 2, 3,
And
and,
5.
is it 5?
And
Ms. Christian?
5.
And 5. Roll call, please.
Ms. Christensen?
Yes.
Mr. Gingona?
Aye.
Mr. Buenaventura?
No.
Ms. Manalo?
No.
Mr. Sylvester?
No.
I make the motion to approve number 5.
Second.
Motion for item number 5. First and a second, any discussion? On the motion to approve item number 5, roll call, please.
Ms. Christensen?
Yes.
Mr. Gingona?
Aye.
Mr. Buenaventura?
Aye.
Ms. Manalo?
Aye.
Mr. Sylvester?
Aye.
I'd
Ms.
like to make a
Christensen?
motion that we start the amnesty program. We've already got it on the books,
Second.
and
Ms.
then we can get this other stuff taken care of later.
On the motion for the amnesty program, any further discussion? I have a question for Mr. Lunghausen. Is this as of January 2018?
That's correct.
And it goes back commencing as of July 1st, 2017?
That's correct.
Okay, any further?
No, that's true.
Just for
Yes.
clarification, though, if we have an amnesty program, we need to have a permit fee in requirement. So 1 and 2 sort of.
I would amend that,
Still after the amnesty program, though.
Okay,
So
because it doesn't apply to the
After
amnesty people.
January 13th.
Yeah, okay.
okay,
Or
then we can
31st.
delay that.
All right, so we have
I'm
first
sorry.
and second, we're still in discussion, Mr. Buenaventura.
We can always discuss the amnesty program, grouping it with the remaining 4, right?
That's within the council's ability.
Totally separate.
Okay,
I understand.
any further discussion? On the motion to begin the amnesty program, roll call, please.
Ms. Christensen?
Yes.
Mr. Gingona?
Aye.
Mr. Buenaventura?
No.
Ms. Manalo?
No.
Mr. Sylvester?
Have a heart for those people on the east side of town.
Well, okay, I can't, I don't understand the purpose behind starting the amnesty program now. And is it because we want to start cleaning up the east side of town? And,
Yes.
and getting folks into compliance? I'm a little bit unsure.
If I may?
Yes.
The amnesty program is for work that's already been completed.
Oh,
So
okay.
it's prior to any new requirements. So it's simply holding their place so that they aren't subject to enforcement or new requirements.
Yeah, but
And that date was set at July 1st, so it's. Could you talk into the microphone? It's to legalize work that has already been completed. So it wouldn't be subject to any of these new requirements.
Yeah, that's
So by having the amnesty program, you're just securing those people, you know, a legal non-conforming status. They're not doing new work. It's work that's been done.
So basically, they're getting a break.
Yeah.
I mean, they're not being, it's not being enforced. You don't comply. The driveway doesn't comply, so.
Driveway doesn't comply, but because there was no permit requirement before, we will acknowledge that they have put it in before the requirement of a permit. So they're basically just confirming their legal non-conforming status.
And it prevents them from getting a ticket
Correct.
for parking in their non-conforming driveway extension.
Well, how does that affect, like, say, the folks in St. Francis and Westlake, if they're also
It
non-conforming?
would apply to everybody who has paved their driveways or their front lawns
All right.
prior to July 1st, 2017.
Vice Mayor?
So the question I have is, you're stating that basically they've already done the work.
Correct.
But if it was approved, and what was the time frame?
The amnesty period would go until January 1st, 2018.
That's right.
Okay, and so if it was approved, does this need to be approved at this time?
It would just begin the amnesty program sooner, and since what seems to be the point of discussion is the aesthetics for new work, it wouldn't apply to the old work anyway.
Okay.
Not old work.
Okay.
Yeah, that's right. That's why number 4, if your concern is about new work, that's where number 4 is really the only pertinent item. Because we need to charge, we do need to have a permit, and we need to charge a minimal fee for it. There needs to be the trigger for remodeling compliance and the amnesty program as we discussed. So if the concern is about aesthetic, we can have a continued discussion about what new driveways wider than 25 on properties wider than 25 feet should be in the future. City council can require Cadillac driveways, and that of course would reduce compliance. But it would also, meet some of the concerns of
Aesthetics.
Aesthetics. So, and that seems to be the sticking point.
All right, I'm very concerned about the east side of our city. It is very difficult for them. So given what I've just heard, I'm going to have to vote yes. Okay? Motion. Okay, and the remaining items will continue.
So we'll work on number 4.
As long as we got our parking spaces.
All right.
That's right, 2, 3. Yeah, that's right. 2, 3, and 4.
All right, let's move.
Oh, right.
All right.
It's taken me 6 years to get this done on the east side of town.
It's a
Actually,
very difficult topic.
2003 was the first parking summit.
All right, out of courtesy for my colleagues here on the council, we've been at this for over 2 hours now. I'd like to put it out there, we do have a couple items left.
Let's go for it.
Shall we continue, or do you want to take a break?
Power through.
Power through? Power through?
Yeah.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, next item on the agenda is the update on Franciscan Mobile Home Park. And we have Ms. Zobel and our city attorney, Ms.
Does it have low carb, high protein? Yeah.
This guy did 30 days where all he did was do this stuff.
Wow.
Oh,
Shit looked terrible, but.
okay. We're still going to move on. Before we move on, there was a question about the assessment of fair housing. Thank you, Ms. Mothershead, and earlier, and it's open to the public. That meeting will be at County Center, 400 County Center in Redwood City, and the date is tomorrow, July 25th at 9 a.m. Hall of Justice, 400 County Center, Redwood City, tomorrow, July 25th at 9 a.m. Thank you, Ms. Mothershead.
Okay.
All right, item number 15, update on the Franciscan Mobile Park, and Ms. Zobel, I'll turn it over. Good evening.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor and members of the City Council. For this item, I will give an overview of affordable housing requirements and compliance at the Franciscan, and then the city attorney will talk about the status of park transfer. In 2002, the Daly City Housing Development Finance Agency issued bonds to enable Link Housing, a nonprofit housing developer, to acquire the Franciscan Mobile Home Park. These bonds are subject to a regulatory agreement which specifies certain affordability restrictions within the park. Let's take a look at what those restrictions are. There are a total of 501 units in the park. 20%, represented by the little purple triangle in the larger of the two circles, are required to be leased to and occupied by low-income residents. These 101 units are also represented by the smaller circle that is green and orange, and these residents are known as the qualified residents. Of the 20%, one half, or a total of 51 units, must, in addition to being occupied by low-income households, have site rents that are affordable to very low-income households. And these 51 units are represented by the green half circle. It is the owner's obligation to ensure that 20% of the sites are rented to low-income households. The qualified resident units are not in fixed locations, however. They are dispersed throughout the park. As one qualified resident exits the program, another qualified resident is added. The specific identity and location of the qualified residents is subject to confidentiality, but it is important to know the sites can float. There are not designated spots in the park that must always be affordable. If a house with a low-income resident is sold to an over-income household, that is not a violation of the regulatory agreement, provided that there are a total of 101 units in the park occupied by low-income residents. The next slide shows how affordable rent for those 51 units is calculated. For a double-wide unit, the regulatory agreement defines an affordable rent by taking 30% of the current published income for a very low-income household of 3. This is derived by HUD, beginning with a median household income in San Mateo County for a household of 4 of $115,300. HUD makes adjustments and calculations to this number to come up with a current definition of very low income that is $59,250 per year for a household of 3. And before you is a calculation for how the affordable rent is calculated for those 51 units. It is currently $1,481 per month. This income limit and this rent calculation is not set by the city, and it is not set by Link. It is set by the federal government. We did receive a recent correspondence from a Cora representative who is also a Franciscan resident, suggesting that rents at the Franciscan should be based on actual household sizes occupying a particular unit. The regulatory agreement, however, specifies that a household size of 3 persons can be presumed for a double-wide mobile home. The owner can set the rent based on a 3-person household, and the rent does not fluctuate based on the number of people actually living in the household. So yes, there could be a one-person household living in a double-wide unit paying a rent that is calculated based on a 3-person household. This is permitted under the regulatory agreement, and the owner is not required to reduce the rents from the scheduled level for households that are smaller than 3 persons. Going back again to the full population of the park, I want to point out the blue section in the larger of the 2 circles. This represents the 400 sites in the park that are not subject to any income or rent restrictions. This is market rate housing. It's like any other residential real estate in Daly City. The owner can charge whatever the market will bear. I'd like to talk briefly about the status of current compliance, because there have been questions about whether Link is operating in compliance with the affordability restrictions. And I'll talk about the process used to confirm that a sufficient number of residents are benefiting from the affordability requirements. Each quarter, Link obtains income and household size data from the 100 qualified residents within the park, 101 qualified residents within the park, and transmits this information in tabular form to the oversight agent. The oversight agent is an outside third party, and currently this position is carried out by Wolf Company. The agent reviews the data, confirms that the listed residents have qualifying incomes, and prepares a summary report that certifies the status of compliance with the regulatory requirements. And this is how the quarterly report is presented in summary form. Several months ago, at a prior study session about Franciscan, and in response to resident suggestions that the park was out of compliance, Council directed staff to look at primary source data utilized by the oversight agent and to confirm the project's compliance. Based on this direction, we requested primary source data from Link Housing, which was a list of tenant names, addresses, incomes, and current rents. The data provided looked like this. In this particular slide, the names and addresses have been redacted for confidentiality purposes. We examined several pages of this data and found it to be consistent with the summary reports that are being submitted by the oversight agent. So based on staff review of resident data, we find that Link is meeting the terms of the affordability restrictions that are recorded against the property. In fact, since becoming owner, the park has not been found to be out of compliance with the regulatory agreement. If it were, the bondholders would be notified and the owner would be subject to significant financial penalties. At this point, it's important to point out that not just 51 units are currently being charged affordable rents at Franciscan. Actually, site rents for the entire park are set voluntarily by Link at a price that is affordable to the low-income household affordability definition. That is, Link made a policy decision several years ago to set rents throughout the park at a level that is affordable at 50% AMI. And going back here, just to summarize, the highest rent anyone in the park currently paying is $1,281 per month, or about $200 less than what's allowed under the deed restriction. The average site rent for the park as a whole is $1,144, or over $300 less than what's allowed under the deed restriction. It is true, some residents have mortgages. So even though their site rent is set at a level affordable at 50% AMI, when combined with a mortgage payment, they could be paying a very high total housing cost. They would be cost burden, and they would be having a hard time paying for food, medicine, and other expenses. But what we do know is that of the 51 households required under the regulatory agreement to have affordable rents, none of these have mortgages. So their site rent truly is their total housing cost. Another issue that has come up in previous meetings is the hardship faced by many park residents who cannot afford the current rents, even at the reduced levels. As I described earlier, rents at the park are set at a level considered affordable to very low-income households. And as shown in this slide, that is a rent that's affordable to a household of 3 whose income is 50% of the area median, or $59,250. Well, there are many residents at the Franciscan with incomes well below this level. There are many with incomes at well below $25,000 per year. The restricted rent, even at $1,481, is not affordable to these households. When you hear the term affordable housing, it doesn't necessarily mean housing affordable to everyone. It means rents are restricted to a particular level depending on the funding source. And this is true for affordable housing developments all over Daly City, the county, and the state. A development might have rents that are 1/2 of what would be charged at a comparable market rate development, but that doesn't mean that everyone can afford to live there or that the owner is obligated to provide it at that rent. To ask Link to drop rents to a level where every existing resident is paying what is specifically affordable to their household would create a shortfall in Link's operations. They are obligated to make bond payments, and they must absorb the costs of park operation. They cannot reduce rents for one household without increasing rents for another. Based on our review of resident data, Link is meeting the terms of the affordability restrictions recorded against the property. We also received 2 other questions and correspondence from Franciscan residents who are also CORA members, which I'd like to go over quickly. First, with respect to Section 8, the regulatory agreement requires that the owner accept Section 8, and the owner is in compliance with this language. Rebecca Clark from Link is here tonight and can answer more specific questions about Section 8 at the park if there are any. Secondly, there was a request to provide a list of the households in the 10% category who have mortgages. That is, of the 51 units who are to be provided on affordable rent, how many have mortgages? There are no households in the 10% category that have mortgages, and in any event, the city is not mandated to order Link to release any confidential tenant information. In fact, release of such information would be a breach of confidentiality agreements that are guaranteed to residents when they provide personal information to the owner. Rebecca Clark, the executive director of Link Housing, the park owner, and Wes Wolf, the park oversight agent, are both here tonight. So if there are questions about rents and compliance and Link's financial operations, I'm sure they can answer these. And with that, would the city attorney like to talk about transfer?
I can give a brief update, Mr. Mayor and the council. The city attorney's office and the agency did receive on July 15th, 2017, the notice of intent to transfer the Franciscan Mobile Home Park. The package does come from Link Housing. The intent to transfer requests the issuer, which is the city and the agency body, to transfer to the Franciscan Housing Corporation, which is a nonprofit corporation formed by the residents. At this time, because we did receive it, we did inform the council at the last study session that the city has to provide reasonable diligence in the review of the package. So agency staff, including bond counsel, will be reviewing the package and be bringing this forward to the city council and the agency for consideration and review of the transfer. Based on the number of documents, and if we do need additional documents, we're looking at probably within 30 to 60 days before we can bring this before the city council.
Thank you, Madam City Attorney. And Ms. Obel, is there anything further in your presentation at this time? Okay, hearing none, I'll open it up to the dais if anybody has any questions. All right, hearing none, I have a couple of questions. Again, it was reiterated in this discussion that the particular units that are classified as low income are floating. So one in, if one moves out, another will move in. The question I have is, how often is compliance being done? Once a year, twice a year?
We receive compliance reports quarterly. I believe residents' incomes are certified annually.
Okay. And maybe we can bring up, Madam City Attorney already kind of alluded, we have to do our due diligence in regards to the transfer process. I'm just, my concern is, they've been wanting to do a transfer, and a lot goes into doing it, and I'm just hoping that we can move forward because of the favorable interest rates than what they're paying now. But we're going to look into
Just so that I could be clear with regards to notice of transfer, the transfer is to assume the current interest rate and to assume the current bond documents. It is not to refinance or refund. It is to assume the current rates.
Current rate. Thank you. All right. I have no further questions at this time. I do have many cards, and I'm going to advise the folks who are about to come up, please try to limit your comments to 2 minutes. And with that being said, I'm going to open it up at this particular time to public hearing. All right, the first card I have is Mr. And a reminder, we do have representatives from Link Housing here. Okay. Did the representatives from Link Housing, before I open it up to public hearing, want to add to staff report or anything at this time, or you agree with what staff has provided? And hi, ma'am. Would you state your name for the record, please?
Hi, Rebecca Clark, Link Housing Corporation.
Thank you.
I'm the president and CEO.
Can you speak up a little bit?
Sure. Let me lean forward or speak up, or
Yeah,
let's
there
see.
you go.
All right. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to come. I'm happy to answer any questions tonight. I know we're running late, so all I wanted to say is we have submitted the documents for review relative to the transfer of the park to the nonprofit FHC. One of the comments, though, to your question about we are proposing to transfer it just essentially under the existing term and financing. However, we do think they're favorable interest rates, and it would be something we would want to talk with the full, the body of the park and the residents about, is how do we best restructure it.
Yes.
So if we can do that, if in fact we can transfer to take advantage of these rates and perhaps be able to do something more to lower some of to find some better, more equitable solution to the people that are most rent burdened, which is difficult under the situation we
Yeah.
have now.
Thank you, Ms. Clark. Okay, so we do have the representative from Link here. So we'll start off with the cards. Mr. Robert Greco, and after him, I think the Draper family left. Do we have the Draper family here?
Yeah, they said they
Okay.
filled out the wrong card.
Okay, oh, they filled out, okay. So after Mr. Greco, next up will be Miss Mary Ann Mann. Okay, Mr. Greco. I'm sorry? Mary Ann Mann.
Different
My
person.
apologies.
Hello, council members and mayor. I hope you're wearing your seatbelts though. Because you got pulled off. Anyway, concerning the park transfer, let me just give you a little information. In California, there's around near 5,000 mobile home parks, and there's only 2% that are resident-owned, and that's around 100. And these resident-owned parks, they have formed committees where the residents all got together, not just a few, not just 10 or 12, but everybody got together and worked on it and made their mobile home parks resident-owned. So what we need to do is not have this decade-old committees here. We need to form more committees, and this is what I'll be trying to work on. As far as the rent increase, you heard Ms. Clark over here. She's doing her best to keep all the rents down. And Wolf and Company, Wes right there, he's the one that's keeping everybody in compliance. So, and as you know right now, the lot sites, you've been told, if somebody moves out that's on a low income, somebody can move in. It's a floating thing, as Betsy was saying. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, Mr. Greco. Okay, Miss Mary Ann Mann. And after Miss Mann, we'll have Mamie Zhu and Sin Thompson. Hi, Miss
Hello,
Mann.
thank you. Good evening, City Council. I have yet to see this thing print out that shows us affordable housing requirements. And I keep looking at these numbers and I'm going, wait a minute, these are all old numbers. There's nothing really new about them. And of the 101, well, guess what? 39 of them are gone. So this is why I can't go by your numbers. Basically, I'm a little concerned because we still have specific problems with the Franciscan Park, and the residents feel abandoned by the very agencies we're supposed to enforce the state and civil codes pertaining to noncompliance violations. As older homes are removed, larger homes are installed without regard to the regulations outlined in Title 25, Chapter 2, Mobile Home Parks, and installation in Chapter 17, Mobile Home Park Act. There are over 35 new homes that do not comply with the Department of Housing and Community Development, which is blatantly ignored by the manager. In the latest demolition, a designated low-income site, we were told permits were obtained from the city, approved by the park manager, and certified by the fire department for removal. The company in charge hastily removed a home at 65 Shoal without verifying the property was empty. This company is not certified by the state to remove asbestos, hazardous materials, appliances, and lead, yet dumped everything in one container for disposal. If the permits were issued, where are they and who signed them? This is just one more example how the city is ignoring the responsibility to fulfill their obligation to abide by the rules and regulations mandated by the state. And we have documentation to back this up.
Thank you, Ms. Mann. Okay, Mamie Zhu and Sin Thompson.
She's not feeling good. She's not here today.
Okay.
So-
Can you speak up a little bit for me, please?
Okay,
Thank you so
Good
much.
evening, everyone. So we're here spend many weeks just try to get a second study section on the council agenda regarding the transfer of the Franciscan Park from Lynn to the FHC board. I thank you, Mr. Mattel, for finally place our issue on the agenda, but I do not understand your motivation for the long delay. On July 20, 2017, in your email, respond to the request from FRAC that certain items be addressed. You state that the city would be prepared to respond. In addition, you also state in bold letter that discussion would be an agenda, informations only, no action taken. Who make those determinations? It is your random, the city council. How can you make the determination before we have even had the opportunity to discuss it? On July 11, 2017, the city received a certified letter from Lynn, which gave notice that Lynn intends to transfer the Franciscan Park to FHC. Must we continue any further delay? I hope that the section tonight would protect the desired outcome for the Franciscan, and the city would follow the court order and regulatory agreement as mandated. Thank you for everyone.
Ms. Zhu, thank you. Next, we have a Michael Zaganti, and after Mr. Zaganti, we have a Bill Stepanovich.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, council members. I know it's been a long night. To the city attorney, I thank you. That's good news that work is being done towards hopefully a transfer of the bond to the residents of the Franciscan. To the council member, I apologize, I don't know your position. There was a slide talking about verification of low income and very low income third-party verification, and I noticed they had dates. Those dates, many of them were really, really old. I'm talking toward 2009. So I'm worried that your data might be a little old, because I'm looking at that slide. I'm not sure where it is, but just at a quick glance, I noticed some of the verification dates up there. I see 1999, 1999, 2006, 2007, 1999. So who are these people? Where are these people? What happened to them? So I don't know how valid this data is on a whole. I see for the self-certification, I see 2012. So there are some gaps there. But I understand we are, and I would like to ask, we have the idea that these sites are sort of protected, low-income sites are supposed to be fixed. We're being told that they're floating. Did that change at some time? Was it amended? Was it altered? I don't know how that miscommunication came to be. But if we do lose 400 or 399 sites for gentrification, that's going to leave 100 low-income people in a park of very, very wealthy people. Probably not many police officers or firemen.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. Okay, Mr. Stepanovich, let me see, updates on
My name is Bill Stepanovich. It's good to hear that Link has offered this letter, because I've done a lot of research and seen how they operate in the past, and much of it has been very questionable. I have one example here about Palm Springs, in which the ex-mayor, the city hall was, and I brought this before the council before, was raided by FBI, and the Riverside County District Attorney's Office about bribery within the city council and the votes for projects. Currently, the DEA has charged the the mayor from 2008 to 2015, Link has had a project called and I think if I pronounce it, the Takutsi Courts Apartments. And in 1993, the city issued a $590,000 tax bond, and it was paid off by 2005, but they reissued it. Several times the ownership's been changed, but there's been some questions about Link and their close association between California Housing Association and Link. And they brought in a private funding, and that was transferred to a LLC like it was at Franciscan. But again, I see that the letter from Link indicating that they want to transfer, and as O'Neill residents, I urge the council to move forward on this issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Stupinovich. Okay, next we have Dave Barrett, and after him it will be Bob Quinn. Good evening, Mr. Barrett.
Evening. Evening, Mr. Mayor, Vice Mayor, and council members. My name is David Barrett. I live at the Franciscan, and I would like to talk about the fourth tier 2002 D-Series bond. I have talked about that bond in the past and would like to bring it up again. Why was it not refinanced in 2007 when the 2002 ABC bonds were refinanced? Was it someone from Daly City preventing this? Someone from Link? Or both? To leave the bond with that high of an interest rate doesn't seem right. Who would do that? I tried to find the financial statements for the 2002 D-Series bond online and wasn't able to. Even though I could find the financial statements for the 2002 A, B, and C, and even the 2007 bonds. Seems a little suspicious. It was also stated recently by Councilmember Christensen that the bonds need to be refinanced before the transfer of the Franciscan can take place. There is nothing in the court order that I can find to support that statement. My understanding is that the only thing preventing the transfer of the park is the approval from Daly City representatives. Can we please make this happen, as it should have already happened years ago? Looking at this chart here, I see there's no households with a mortgage. So if there are any houses with a mortgage, then their rent should be, and they're low income, very low income, their rent should be anywhere from $500 to $800. I don't think the representatives from the Franciscan have access to this. There's confidentiality, so we can't confirm one way or the other. But if they do have mortgages, then we're not giving a complete chart.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Mr. Quinn. And after Mr. Quinn, we have a Pedro Gonzalez. Thank you, folks, for adhering to the time limit the best you can. Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Quinn.
Good evening, Mayor and Vice Mayor, council members. My name is Bob Quinn from the Franciscan Mobile Home Park, and this is the protected sites at the Franciscan here. This one, no, this way. Here we go. This is what happens here, is there's a protected site. It's a house that could be, I think you drove past this and looked at it yourself. It could be sold to a low-income family. This is what happens to it. It gets wrecked. And in place, by the way, which I don't think is right, there's no asbestos or dust or environmental things done. And then they slap a great big one like this on it. And then the easements, there's not a fireman in California that could fit around this building. And there's several of them like this. I don't have all the pictures, but I'll get them for you. And this is what they do. They wreck these buildings in place. They're perfectly good. And then this is what winds up on it. They're just gutting the low-income element in this mobile home park for their own benefit, so everybody makes money except for the poor people, and they're taking all the low-income houses out, putting big $300,000 homes in. This isn't the way it's supposed to go. Not supposed to be happening. Everybody knows it, and it's just a wink-wink, and we don't know anything, but we live there, and this is what's happening. And here we have 18 new homes on protected sites, along with all this wrecking and carnage going on, and yet nobody knows anything about it. They don't know about it, you don't know about it. It's got to stop. This is nonsense, but come September 26th, everybody's going to know about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Quinn. Mr. Gonzalez, and then we have a Mr. Tam, and Sonny's going to come up with him.
My name is Pedro Gonzalez. I lead at the Franciscan since 2002. And to pick up on your line about being aggressive in terms of creating affordable housing for Daly City, we residents of the Franciscans have been aggressively fighting to get the mobile home park transfer into what it was agreed back in 2002. So it's about 15 years that we've been fighting aggressively to make a reality of what was agreed on back in 2002, in which was to transfer the park into somehow into the residents being able to be homeowners, okay? And we talk about 15 years. And this hasn't been happened if it wasn't for a lawsuit that lasted over 5 years, as many of you know, in San Mateo Court. And after it was a settlement agreement in which the city agreed on, Link agreed on, we're still waiting for this to happen. And all of us, it's gonna be 11 o'clock, and it really doesn't matter how long it's going to take. We wanna tell you to please help us to realize what it was agreed on back in 2002, in which the mobile home park was going to be transferred into a 501c corporation in which the residents would be part of, owners. That was what was agreed on within the city, the residents, and Link Housing. And we are, 15 years later, still fighting. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. Tam, and Sonny, you're going to stand up there with him, or you're going to speak? Okay.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Mr. Tam resides at the Franciscan Park. Unfortunately, he speaks very little English, so I'm going to help him discuss with you his concerns. There was a recent rent increase at the park that has no justification at all. I had conversation with Rebecca, and I questioned why they were planning to have this rent increase, and she promised me on the same day you will receive documents to justify this. This was 2 months ago, ladies and gentlemen. It was never discussed at the FLC, there was no vote. It was adopted by Rebecca Clark. Now, Mr. Tam can barely afford the $1,200 rent already. And we do not believe that there is compliance at the park simply because everybody is paying an average rent. This is not the purpose of the regulatory agreement. This is not the purpose why you folks gave Link Housing $53 million. You are providing affordability to the richer folks here, instead of bringing down the rent and bring affordability to the low-income population. We will never agree on the compliance here because you folks speak a different language that doesn't apply to the regulatory agreement. You can create beautiful graph and whatever, but the fact is there are at least 40 homeowners right now whom we have to feed, deliver food to their homes because they could not afford the rent. And Mr. Tam is one of the coordinators in our food program. Ladies and gentlemen, think about this crime. Where is the motivation here to help the poor. What is the motivation
Okay.
really?
All right, thank you, Mr. Kenny.
Okay, and I will speak for.
Mr. Wong, I got a card here for Mr. Wong. Okay, hello, Mr. Wong.
Thank you.
You're going to speak, Sonny?
I will speak for Mr. Wong.
Okay, the last few words you said is, where's the motivation?
Yeah. Now, he has a different concern.
Okay.
But of course, he is also asking for the motivation of this government on what's going on with the park. But I hope you express some concern with what we are talking about right now. You have an agenda here that says no action to the Franciscan issue. Where is the intent to move forward? Mayor, you mentioned that we should move forward. This is only for information. What do we accomplish tonight? If Pat Martel tells you there will be no action, at the very least, let's have further discussion. Let Link sit down with us and discuss with us what their intents are, and Attorney Zimmerman, I think you should sit down with us and discuss exactly how the transfer should happen pretty soon. Because let me tell you this, it's not just about the transfer to FHC. It's about all the crimes, the corruption that had been going on at the park because of the owners and the management that they appoint. So what we have in question here is remove the ownership from Link, allow the residents' active participation in the ownership of the park, which is mandated by the court order. In other words, you solve the problems that we are throwing to you tonight simply by removing that authority from Link Housing. That is the transfer that we need. It is not just about the transfer of ownership to us. It's about removing Link and US Group from what is going on right now at the park, where, from their own words, they said more rich people are coming in at the park.
Okay, Mr. Kenny, your time is up on that.
Thank
matter.
you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Wong. Thank you. All right. I got one more card, and that's you, Mr. Kenny.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for
Yes.
accommodating our friends here. Let me just state the fact here. The city had consented to the transfer via the settlement agreement. There's no need for us to be begging and kneeling down and asking for consent. Via the settlement agreement, the consent is there. And therefore, we're only working on the process. What do you require? But also, we need to correct what's going on at the Franciscan right now. Betsy, you mentioned in the last meeting that you can find a developer who is not in compliance with the project. These graphs here do not show any compliance. Okay? Up to today, Wolf and Company that you appointed as the compliance agency had not submitted any report to us. Where is the compliance? Where do you get your information? You folks declare that you appointed the compliance agency to furnish your information, and therefore, where is the information from Wolf? We ask Link Housing, their lawyer, where is the report? And they say, well, the city has it. Who's got the compliance report from Wolf? We're paying them monthly. You folks allowed RSG to resign, and they left with all the crimes they have committed. I hope they're being investigated still by the FBI right now. But the fact is, the compliance issue is huge. Because here we have figures, and I wonder if Mr. Wolf has any part of this. Okay? Now, the previous compliance agency has this format. Information comes from US Group, Mr. Quigley. He submits these records of the site.
Okay, Mr. Kenny, you got that finish up. I know it looks
I
like you got
understand.
more.
Just let me have my conclusion. We
okay.
do not agree
Okay.
to anything that the city says that they are in compliance. It's a different language that you folks are talking about.
All right.
But we're here to push on into the transfer.
All right.
That's our intention.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Kenny. I received a letter here from Sin Thompson. However, there's no need for me to read the letter into the record because Ms. Zhu did bring it to our attention. So with that, all right. So I have no more cards, and we're going to move on. Before moving on, I'd like to make a couple of comments. This was an information session this evening, and it allowed us the opportunity to get more in-depth information. I'd like to thank staff for furthering our request from the previous council meeting to have the representatives from Link here to also be here at this time. I'd like to make mention that if this was a study session, not necessarily would comments be allowed. However, this was an informational session, and we felt that it was as a courtesy to allow public comment, and that's what we did. I do have some thoughts and concerns that hopefully as we move on, you did hear from the city attorney that we received your information regarding the transfer. So now we have to do due diligence and look at that information, and we will get back to you on that. I'm concerned about the floating units, as it was informed to me that the units float. However, with the pictures, if we keep having units come in, and it floats, I don't know. I think there's going to be a time where if we can get an update on compliance, which I'm hearing that nobody else gets this compliance report other than the city or whatever is just reported to us. But I would like to obtain and actually see this compliance report. Also, looking at the chart up there, if there's supposed to be 101 low-income units, that chart up there represents 51 units. Do we have more? It only, I added up the numbers, it come up to 51, so I think we're missing 49 units.
No.
Okay,
Those are the restricted rent ones.
okay.
The deed, if I may, the
Yes,
deed
yes, Ms.
restriction,
Oba.
the deed restriction requires that 101 of the sites are occupied by, leased by and occupied by very low-income residents.
Okay, so
Of those, 51, the green slice.
Yes,
Must be not only occupied by very low-income residents, but have a restricted site rent. So the orange slice,
Yes.
only needs to be, under the regulatory agreement, only needs to be occupied by a very low-income household. There is, the owner is not obligated to offer an affordable rent to those units.
Mr. Mayor, if I
Yes.
might inject, we've had the benefit of Mr. Wolf sitting here for the entire meeting, and I think that it would benefit the council and those present for the person who is responsible for the reports that we are given and that we review to explain how the information is gathered, because there seems to be a very big misunderstanding about that. So since Mr. Wolf made it all the way up here to visit us at this meeting, I think we ought to hear from him.
Good evening, Mayor, members of the City Council.
well, Mr. Wolf, okay, I'm glad to have you. The questions I have, and, the compliance issue, how the rent increases are determined. Was also brought up D-series bonds in 2002, and how come there's lack of information moving from 2002? And,
Mr. Mayor, we can answer all those, but those are not all questions for Mr. Wolf.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Mr. Martel.
He
Okay.
specifically can respond to the issue about
The
compliance.
compliance, gotcha.
So
All
any
right.
of your compliance questions
Yes,
in the
ma'am.
report, he
Okay.
can respond to.
All right.
Ms. Clark can respond to the questions about the rent increase, and staff, including the city attorney, we can all respond to the questions about the bonds.
Thank you.
I think, Mayor, the problem in the city council is.
Can you step in front of the podium?
Is
so
the
that
definition of what is median and low income.
Right.
You're in an area right now where the median, or the maximum income according to HUD is $115,300. You take, as Betsy's chart shows, 59,000 is basically a family of three. You can have a good rent. We can pay that $1,400 rent if we had to on that income. I think a lot of the residents are thinking that income is too high. We didn't set the income, the feds did. So we just have to have someone to move in that's a low income at that figure, and that staggers a lot of people. They look at that and go, that's not a low income or affordable person. It is according to HUD. We just adopted their rules when you did the bond issue. And every year they go up. So the person that's stuck at 20 or 30,000 because they're retired, they're not gonna get to the 59,000. But Link, I'll defend Link. If you look at that chart, the other 400 people up there, they're paying $1,200 like everybody else in the park. Those all could have went to market rate. They could be a lot higher than $1,200. Link didn't do that. Link's put everybody in the park at, well, Betsy, whatever the figure is, $1,281 or something like that. So we have the low income, and we should have the market rate, but Link has never moved us up to market rate rents. They've kept them as affordable for the whole park. So, we can debate numbers, but they basically are what they are, and it's because of your high median income here. And there is really no subsidy in the world to help the people at the lower end make their rent payments. I can go back and look at Section 8. Section 8 gets confused. The 1937 Housing Act that was adopted when none of us were around has a Section 8 in it, and that's where these low-income numbers come from. There's another Section 8 that is administered by your housing authority that allows people to get subsidies if they're low income to help pay their rent. So there's really two programs with the same name. So people get confused, oh, Section 8, what is Section 8? Well, we use Section 8 for the income. There's another program that people can apply for to help them with their rent payments. Whether the people in the park are doing that, I have no control over, but your regulatory agreement says that Section 8s can be included in their rent payments. So if they're not applying for that, if they're not aware of that, then, we can't control that. But there's only so many Section 8 rent vouchers that flow around San Mateo County. So if they're all taken, then these people are out of luck. So even if the residents take over the park, I'm not sure how we're gonna get the rents down low enough to meet some of the people here that have the income problems. So whether, we apply for grants or figure out some way to assist those families, there's always gonna be a need that we have to figure out a way to fulfill.
Thank you, Mr. Wolf. Crystal, any other questions for Mr. Wolf from the council pertaining to compliance and rents? Thank you, Mr. Wolf.
You're welcome. And I'll stay afterwards if you have any other questions.
All right. Ms. Martel, you had made mention, I guess, Ms. Rebecca.
The rent increase that you raised the question about, and that was a
Operations?
public comment, Ms. Clark can speak to that.
Okay.
So one of the points that was made was that we raised the rents this year, and we did so as Link Housing, as the owner of the park, without actually having a vote of the FHC Advisory Committee. So what's a little confusing also is FHC is now the nonprofit that was formed by the residents, where we're actually hoping to make this transfer to FHC and transfer the ownership. But at this time, the ownership is actually still with Link Housing or Franciscan Park LLC. So what happens is we've often gone before the advisory committee, before FHC, and we did transmit the information about the budget to them and said we do need to have a rent increase this year. At the end of the day, what did happen last year was that we had a meeting and they chose not to vote on it. we did not have, actually, we did not have a rent increase last year. It might have been the year before. I'm getting confused. But the point is that it's an advisory committee. We have often taken it to them for consideration, to get approval, which they've always voted, those members from the park have voted against. But at the end of the day, we did not take it to them this year. But we did thoroughly explain, we did transmit the data and say that we really had to have a rent increase at that 3% level, keeping up with expenses, and we shared all the different information with them. One of the points that was made earlier, and this is what Mr. Wolf is talking about, is that we have chosen to just try and keep rents as low as we can across the board. We could say, well, let's freeze those that are in the ones that are rent restricted, those 51, and let everything else start to float to make up for it. So we would have to raise them more, and then others keep flat or even decrease. The problem with, so that we have the same amount of income. The problem with that is that we know that there are probably more low-income people in the park. And because this is about self-certification, people self-certify their income for the welfare tax exemption. It's not quite the same as when we do third-party verification, which is required in many of our affordable housing developments. So in this case, what we have done is we've said, let's just keep as many of them. Let's keep it sort of even across the board. What I would hope to do is, again, we would like to get the park transferred, but the whole thought is there a new way, if we refinance it, that we could start to provide through a new, financing mechanism, possibly through the mobile home, it's called MPROP. I want to talk to them about options of whether we can get a rental assistance fund that might allow us to start to allow some differentiation, but it certainly wouldn't be for all 500 units. We just can't make the numbers work. It's not a project where you could have everybody truly have true affordable rents to people at even what you call extremely low income, at people that make 30% or less of their median income. Wes also referred to this idea of Section 8, and if people do have Section 8 vouchers from HUD, which is a long list, I know, waiting list, but they can be used at the park. It's happened once, only once that we know of since its existence. The other question was regarding the bonds, but I can't answer that question. That goes back, predates me, and so certainly we can look into it, or the city manager said she could look into it as well. I'm also happy to stay and answer any other questions that you might have. Or if there are any questions for me.
Vice Mayor has a question, but I need to clear something up if I could, please. So what I'm hearing is that in the entire park, and when they're talking about moving in a $300,000 mobile home, that person is not paying no more than $1,281 a month?
So right now, that is the highest actual rent for the entire park. And one of the things that I suggested, and we do have control over, is to start to say, for people moving in, that we start to charge more, which would help to offset. I mean, these are all policies, but because we're moving in the direction of transferring the park, we haven't made any radical changes.
All right, another concern I have is the city has a position, because you're not giving the residents the power to voice their concerns. They establish a 501c3 so we can begin the transfer process, but yet on this rent increase, and clearly by your admission, they were not allowed to speak. Probably the rent increase would have happened anyway, but the fact is, if you give them a chance to explain, is it because of operations, things have gone up? I think that would have gone a long way, but they feel that they haven't gotten that, and I think that's why we are here today, because of that. And also to have a city representative on, I guess, with Link to help make the decisions as to what happens in the park, I think that's a conflict of interest. And, the city has nothing to do with it other than you know, they're part of holding the bond, and they have to do due diligence in making sure that bond is being paid. But to have a representative representing Daly City, I just think it's a conflict of interest. It's just my
So I didn't have anything to do with setting that up. This was set up back in 2002. Again, the whole notion of the way this was set, so
Okay.
I can't
I
address
understand.
why.
Well, but that's the frustrations
Yeah.
I'm hearing, and
Sure.
I wanted to bring
We
that up.
have held several community meetings, really working to try and bring more people from the park into the discussion, things that haven't been done in the past and so on. We're open to trying all kinds of things too. And I would say that we do have actually quite a good track record across the state. I'm happy to share that.
Thank you. I have no further, Vice Mayor.
I think you mentioned the question I was going to ask around the process. You mentioned that before you would go to the FRAC and just provide information on rent increases. And so I wanted to know why in particular in this last rent increase did you not reach out to the residents?
So what we have done in the past is we always send the information to the 3 representatives that FRAC has appointed to the advisory committee. And we did still send all of that information out, and I still did have conversations about that. We did not hold a vote on it, and so we actually have compliance that we have to stay in compliance with. Our investors are asked, on the bond investors are requiring this information. We needed to move and expeditiously to make sure that the park had sufficient funds to operate. So, going forward, we will go back to that. Obviously, we hope that we will transfer the park before we have to do another budget, and then that won't be an issue.
Thank you.
I'm good. Any other comment from the dais? All right. Thank you, Ms. Clark. No, Sonny, this is just information only. You had your chance, because it's not a debate, and besides, it's getting late. I want you to talk, but we have to move on. Compliance, information, the rent increases. When's our next compliance report coming? Will it be?
And you have
Mr.
a
Wolf?
bond question.
We get them
bond.
quarterly, right?
You wanted to
Yeah,
ask
we get them
about the
quarterly.
bond.
City Attorney, you address
Okay,
that.
you're resolved. Good.
Yes.
We don't have any reports.
Compliance, well, the compliance report, Mr. Wolf, I do understand, and as Ms. Zobel says, it's a confidentiality thing. You cannot, the reports have to be redacted, but is that information that can be provided to the residents or the association of the park as to whether they are in compliance? Because it seems like that's the question. They keep saying it's not. I'm hearing from our city staff that it is. Can we provide, is that possible, or is that confidential?
Kim,
Up to the microphone.
Oh, okay,
please.
all right.
So the report that is prepared by Mr. Wolf, that is provided to the city, is public record. As it pertains to the specific individuals
Oh,
and
yeah.
the data, that is confidential. So that report is available. It's provided to the city on a quarterly basis. It is
That's the report right
public
there,
record.
right?
Just 2 lines.
It's actually
No
a report.
information.
So the report that we get quarterly that can be made public only gives numbers. So it just shows the numbers of units and that kind of thing. It does not have any personal identifying
But it's not just
information on it. No, it's
There's a
It's like the
certificate,
big
it's a
chart.
certification that it's,
yeah.
that they're
So
in
there is
compliance.
data, but you will not know from looking at that document who it is and that kind of thing, which is what the confidentiality is that we have to maintain.
And we have provided that previously. I'm sure I can show documentation of that.
Okay, the mere fact that that report shows the percentage, I'm sure they're not concerned about the names and it's redacted, but just the percentage, the Franciscan is in compliance. Percentage.
I think the concern has been, though, is that they don't believe the data. I mean, I can't, and I'm happy to try and figure out how, to move beyond that, but I think that's where we get stuck.
I think the problem is non-belief of the data and perhaps the issue about floating.
But floating units is the way, if you look at the way HUD, the state, and everyone looks at affordable housing, that is and it's particularly in bonds, you can speak to this, but that is the way it happens. If one moves out, and someone moves in over, you have to make it available to the next affordable. It happens across all of housing, apartments as well as mobile home parks.
Hypothetical.
Yeah.
The place is torn down and it was $60,000, $80,000, and they put a $400,000 piece of property there. So that's low income?
No, Mayor, I'm assuming that person wouldn't qualify in the first place.
Exactly. So what happens when you get more new ones coming in and we're not, so are we redoing it and finding the residents, you know what, you qualify for low income, so we're going to classify yours as low income and let this high one come in?
We have more, yes, we have more low-income people qualified than are needed. So when one person moves out that maybe they were low income and someone comes in that's a higher income, someone else from the low income pool will slip into, will take that slot, will that 101 slot.
All right, okay.
Because we have 400 market rate spots.
That's correct.
400. And there are 101 for low-income people, and only 51 of those are restricted rents.
Correct.
That's correct.
Yes.
So if 14 or 15 or 20 or 30 people move in that are higher income, they're in the 400. I'm just trying to, that's a question, not a statement. Is that correct?
That is correct, but I think the question is, to the extent that someone moves out that was on the either 101, let's call it the 101.
Then another low-income person from the 400 or the 50 moves into that slot.
So what happens is, if you, think of it this way, if you only had truly 101 people that were low income and everyone else was above low income.
Yeah, that's not true there.
That's exactly right. But if that were the case, then when a low-income person moved out, you would have to have a low-income person move in.
Right.
But what happens is we have more than 101, way more, that qualify. So we have to continue to watch it, but we're in compliance. I mean, I'll let you speak to us.
The same thing's going to happen to the new owner. They're going to do the same problem, same regulatory controls. You have to do the same nightmares every month. You know, who's moving in, who's moving out. So.
What I'm thinking is happening is, I think numbers are being played with, because if a low income moves out, they will pick somebody who's maybe paying just under $12.81 per month and classify them as low income and put them in one of those places.
You can't do that.
No.
They have to bring their income tax, right?
They have to be certified. So that's why we have a compliance company certifying, to make sure that the people who are qualifying based on their income level, that we're verifying that and can confirm that that is in fact the case.
All right. All right. I don't have any further questions at this time. Hopefully, we will continue to get the data that shows that the Franciscan is in compliance. We heard from Madam City Attorney also. We got the document from the Franciscan for the transfer process, and we're going to look into it for due diligence at this particular time.
I just have a
Madam
question.
Christensen.
Yeah. The question that was brought up about the dates of the verifications, I mean, I don't get it. Why is there verification on there from 2004? It says the last, verified whatever. I can see the concern with that. It's like, incomes change. families, you know, one or two people move in, the other people get a job, things change. So if those dates were within 12 months of the current date, I think the residents of the Franciscan would be a little more confident that these verifications were actually currently real and not from a decade or two ago.
One of the things that we're required to do every year in order to work to get the property welfare
Right.
tax exemption is to collect the income data from
Right.
everyone who will submit it in the park. We are allowed to use self-certification for the purposes of determining the, both the welfare tax exemption, you know, relative to income, as well as the compliance with the restriction. So there is not, this is not like a tax credit project where we actually have to go every year and do what's called third-party verification. So I'm thinking that those old dates, if I were to look at it, were the
Right.
third-party verification, where the newer dates you would see in the date of
But
most
there's still
recent.
some 2012s
No, they're
in
all,
there.
if you look at the date of most recent self-certification,
Yeah.
they were all from 2015.
Well, except for the one from 2012.
Where,
About midway, a little bit below. Oh, could be.
they should all be current, and we can double-check that.
Oh, it was third-party verified on the same
Yes.
date.
Yeah, so that's
okay.
usually the date that they move in.
Well, then, certainly maybe an explanation on this that says third-party verification is not required.
Fair enough.
So that, because I could see that, I'd have that same question they had. What the hell? You know, 1999? I mean, come on, that's a while ago. But the person self-certified as recently as 2015, and I'm assuming this stuff lags by at least a year. The whole process does, because it's an annual,
By each year.
because it's an annual certification.
Correct.
Yeah.
And we'll go sit and go through those certifications later this year.
Yeah, okay, well, I think that's been a little clarified then. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wolf and Ms. Clark.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor.
Most enjoyable
All right.
and informative.
All right.
Mayor?
Vice Mayor.
Thank you. I just want to say thank you to Link Housing. When this was brought up in affordable housing, it was definitely important, and the mayor stated that to have the Franciscan and also to have Link Housing present to have further questions. We got the update from our attorney that the transfer has been received. I think in the next process, as the mayor mentioned, is really looking at that. And just in curiosity, what is our timeline around the due diligence process, please?
So at this point, we just received a notice of intent to transfer, which is a request from the city council to transfer the park. However, part of the due diligence, which is not necessarily addressed in the transfer package that we have to review, is they have to assume the bonds. And part of that assumption is that they are an entity that can have the financial backing to assume the bonds, as well as have a property management company with the like experience and reputation of the current owner. So that due diligence may take some time. In fact, we may be corresponding with the current owner to ask for additional information, so when we bring it before the council, we will have it well-informed. That being said, I'm looking at 30 to 60 days, but it can take as long as 90 days, depending on how much more information we have before we go to the council. The due diligence is a requirement of the regulatory agreement because we do have bondholders and trustees involved in this.
And if the information that we have is not significant to ensure that the economic resources are there to support the bonds, then what happens? Even if it's
It is
beyond
at
the
the
90
discretion
days?
of this agency, the Housing Finance Agency, to consent or not consent to a transfer.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? All right. That was for information only. We're going to move on to Ms. Obel and Ms. Mother's Head. Thank you so much. All right, going to move item 16, rejection of bids for enhanced pedestrian and bicycle visibility improvement project. And we have Mr. Yip and Mr. Fuller. Mr. Fuller's not here. Keep forgetting your last name, sir.
It's a long night.
What's your last name? I keep forgetting. Okay. All right.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor and City Council members. Staff recommends that the City Council reject all bids for the Enhanced Pedestrian and Bicycle Visibility Improvements Project and authorize the staff to re-advertise the project at a later date with the necessary amendments to the bid documents. The city was awarded $337,500 from the Measure A grant for the design and construction of the project. The project proposes to install flashing pedestrian signals at 3 intersections and approximately 10 miles of bike routes. The city received 2 bids for the project, ranging from $448,000 to $466,000. The amounts were significantly higher than the engineer estimate of $270,000. The greatest difference was due to the installation of the signals, which have increased significantly over the past several years due to demand. The bids were also higher due to the low competition for work in the current construction industry market. So due to the increased costs, the grant funds were insufficient to award the project as planned. The scope of the project will be reevaluated and/or additional appropriation from the city's AB 1600 transportation fund balance will be requested at a future date. Staff has also submitted an application of $200,000 for the TDA Article 3 grant, which was just approved on the consent calendar. So staff recommends the City Council reject all bids that were received on June 20th, 2017 for the project and authorize staff to re-advertise the project at a later date with the necessary amendments to the bid documents.
Move to reject the bid.
Second?
Yeah, first and a second, discussion? Hearing none, let's see, adopt resolution, roll call, please.
Ms. Christensen?
Yes.
Mr. Gangona?
Aye.
Mr. Buenaventura?
Aye.
Ms. Manalo?
Aye.
Mr. Sylvester?
Aye.
Thank you, Councilmember and Mayor.
Good job.
All right, good
It
job.
makes me feel guilty that we didn't, we should have
Wait
put you guys first.
You were totally listening. It was a slam dunker.
Good job, all
Slam
right.
dunk.
All right, good night. Okay, we have 2 cards. I'm going to open it now for public appearance and oral communications. We'll start off with Ms. Pamela D. Giovanni.
Mayor, I'll defer until the next meeting. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ms. Mary Ann Mann. Come on up, Ms. Mann. Okay. Tomato, tomato.
Share the same husband.
Hi.
Good evening. I know it's late, and I'd like to speak to those who are still up watching this. Our police department and our fire department both give a great deal of their time when they're not working to the citizens of Daly City. And on this Thursday, July 27th, from 9 to 11:30 a.m., there will be another Bocce Bash tournament. And the teams that will be competing is Daly City Police, Daly City Firemen, Dolger Seniors, and Sirs. Now come and have fun, everyone, and cheer for your favorite team. Everything is free. We have cookies, cakes, beverages, etc. They'll be served to the attendees while they're there. And there are also, everyone who comes in will get a free ticket for a raffle. And they can participate in other games like the beanbag toss and spoon race and that kind of thing. But the important thing is to mix and mingle with the wonderful police and fire that we have, because they have done incredible things for my senior, not my seniors, but to seniors in general. When a policeman wears a uniform or a fireman is there, they respect them, but they don't really look at them as human. But then when they come and bring their children and grandchildren, everyone has a wonderful time. In fact, Rose Micheletti, who's 96 and 7 months, she said that's the first time she ever talked to a fireman like he was a real person. So I'm inviting everyone to come. It's free and enjoy.
What
Have a
day
good night.
and what
I'm going
time?
home.
27th?
What time, Marion?
What time?
From 9 to 11:30,
Oh, it's in the morning.
okay?
Thank you. All right, next is appointments from the dais. Any appointments? I have one. I would like to appoint Commissioner Teresa Proano from the Recreation Commission to the Planning Commission. A little background, I received a resignation from Mr. Rick Crump, and that position is currently open at this time.
Second.
Oh, okay, I made the motion. Okay, we have first and second discussion. Do we do a roll call on this one, Madam? Voice. Okay, voice vote, please.
All those in favor?
All those in favor say aye.
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 Motion passed. Oh, wow, that was quick.
Mr. Mayor, given your appointment, Ms. Perano was my appointee to the Recreation Commission. That leaves a vacancy. So at this time, I'd like to appoint Andrea Wilcox to that position.
I'm sorry, didn't hear the name.
Andrea Wilcox.
Okay, we have a motion, and I'll second that. Discussion. Okay. All those in favor of appointing Andrea Wilcox to the Recreation Commission, say aye.
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 Okay, any others? All right. Reports, council and committee. I'm going to defer my comments.
It's your computer.
Okay. Well, no, I'll let my colleagues go first. There is a couple of things. Anybody? All right. This is just quick. I'm looking into establishing a budget finance committee to look over the budget and the finance issues affecting our city. I'll provide more information in that in another council meeting. Number two. Sorry?
Mr. Mayor, we have a finance committee.
Budget Finance Commission.
The finance committee can look at budget issues of any sort. So we actually have a committee that is designed to do that if that's what you wish to do.
What I wish to do is to get more of the constituents and the citizens of Daly City involved in looking at the finance and coming up with creative ways to, provide information to council. I know I'm part of this finance committee, but I may not have all the expertise. So I guess this is something we can follow up
So
on.
for clarification, so we can put something together for you. So you're talking about an advisory committee on budget issues, then? If you're talking about a
Yes.
citizens committee, you're
Yes.
talking about an advisory group, not a
Advisory.
council.
Don't make it a commission.
Okay,
Make it an
all right.
advisory committee.
An advisory committee of, that you would have public members and
Yes.
not of the council. So I was referring to the council having a finance committee
Okay.
to deal with budget issues.
Yes, Ms. Martell, thank you. Now, the other committee, since the chief is still here, I know there are some traffic grants out there, and there are certain areas in the city that requires enforcement, but we may not have the staff, and we do the best that we can. I would like to look into possible grants for traffic-related issues that we can perhaps get a grant for to pay police officers to work towards, whether it's signals, signs, enforcement at certain intersections, increasing the fines. I mean, I know there's grants out there, and if we haven't already done so.
Yeah, Mayor, we do that with our traffic enforcement. We look at it every year, and most of the grants we get is through OTS. So we were just recently granted $100,000 for pedestrian and safety. So So we look at that for DUI, we look at it for traffic calming. So OTS is really the basic one that gives it to us. So every year we apply it, and so far, knock on wood, we've gotten them, so.
Great, Chief. Thank you so much. And if you can, give us a report and update us on that, on the various grants that come through OTS. And, we want to try to get everything that we can, and I appreciate
Right, because
that we are.
also Public Works worked, because Mission Street's a state highway.
Yes.
Public Works had applied for a grant maybe about 3 or 4 years ago, and they just received a grant to put lights up on Mission and Westlake area. So again, we're constantly trying to get
Thank
those
you.
with those. And with Daly City, with OTS, we're one of the lead agencies that they always fund us.
Thank you so much, Chief.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, ma'am.
whenever the city applies for a grant,
Mm-hmm.
the council is advised about that. And to appropriate funds when we receive a grant, the council
to
has
vote
to
on it.
approve of the appropriation. So you will hear about every single grant that we've applied for and gotten acceptance for, because the council will have to approve that.
Yeah, because again, with the traffic unit, with Captain Hensley, who's running right now, with Sergeant Sheik Hussein, they're pretty good at pushing out for those contracts.
Thank you so much. I'm just putting out ideas. I mean,
Yeah.
if there's a grant to
doesn't-
study caterpillars, I would like to apply for it if we can. I may not know every grant that's out there, but I'm just throwing out the resources and
Don't
hope
you-
the staff would do the same.
Don't you want to announce a night of involvement that the community want to participate in pretty soon?
Is that National Night Out?
Yes. While you're up here, why not?
I don't have the information, but again, it's
It's
the
coming.
first Tuesday of August, and it'll be again at Ceremony Mall. They're allowing us to use their parking lot. It usually starts about 5 o'clock, and it goes about 8 o'clock. And so come out and join us. Police will be out there, fire, local agencies. Be a lot of things for the kids to do. And again, good place to come out there and enjoy the food trucks. But so yes, first Tuesday of August, please come out. It was very successful last year. One more thing, again, Mayor, as you know, is that there is a lot of grant funding out there for DOJ that we get, but a lot of times they have stipulations, and stipulations are that we fund it initially, maybe get reimbursed, or we pay for a percentage and they put it in. And so a lot of it has to do with we just don't have the money to front out for those types of grant. In other words, we put in for more officers. With a COPS grant, they want money up front, and we just don't have that money. If we did, we wouldn't be asking for the grant, so.
Yes, sir.
But trust me, we're out there
Thank
trying to
you,
get as
sir.
much as we can.
Thank you, Chief.
you.
All right, that's all I have for reports. Anybody else on the council?
I just have a request around, since small businesses are the, foundation of our communities, I'd like to know how we can assist our small businesses to upgrade their storefronts, or if there's any federal funding in lieu of what the mayor was talking about, if we can research and see if there's any federal funds around assisting in small businesses. I'd appreciate that.
We certainly can bring you a report back. We have done that in the past.
Yeah.
The biggest challenge is the match that has to be provided by the small businesses for those kinds of programs. But we can bring the details and explain to you how it works.
Thank you. Thank you, Vice Mayor, Ms. Martell, for that clarification. Okay, anything further? All right. And staff, no reports from staff? Okay, so I'd like to move ahead to close this meeting. However, I do have some memory to adjourn the meeting in memory of. We'll first start off with Edna Koopman. She's a resident of the Franciscan Mobile Home. She passed 2 weeks ago. We also have Emmanuel Espinoza, who is the grandfather of Miguel Espinoza, who's a water and wastewater employee. Lastly, we have a Daniel Ornelas, father of Dana Ornelas, of a police department employee. So with that being said, I'd like to close this meeting in memory of the following. Thank you so much. This meeting's now adjourned.